Hello and welcome to the BNB Show. My name is Brandon Kane, and this guy here to my left, that's my cohort, Seahawks, Brendan Nelson, back here in the house. Brendan, how's the day going?
So far so good. For me, it's just starting, you know. For me, it's
Yeah,
just started, but so far so good.
that's good to hear. Unfortunately, we're not able to come to you guys after a nice, beautiful victory as we have been doing recently, and instead we've got to come to you guys after the bit of this loss, and we're going to be previewing the Viking game, but I suppose we've got to turn over a little bit because we haven't had a chance to talk a little bit on in regards to this Packer game. So I suppose from a major takeaway standpoint, where do you stand on that one?
I mean, there's not much to say other than I guess you're just a little outclassed by some of these teams a little bit, right? And you think back to that game, I think it does highlight the difference in these two coaching staffs more than anything else, maybe, where you see how easy Matt LaFleur makes life for his quarterback in Green Bay. You see how easy it looks for Jordan Love, where he doesn't have to do much and he still ends up playing a really great game. And then you see how hard life is for some of our players. You see how hard life is for our quarterback. And you see how they're able to kind of do what you would think they would want to do going into the game. And then you compare it to like our team having to abandon the run so early because you fall behind 14-0 in the blink of an eye. You see how it seems like they're ready for what we're planning to do on defense. Like all the screen passes they ran early, all the check downs and dump offs, all of them extremely productive pretty much. It just seemed like their coaching staff worked our coaching staff like a speed bag. That's the number one thing I think I came away with coming away with that game. And there was a lot more to take away from it, but that was the number one thing that stuck out to me.
Yeah, I similarly across the board on that, Brendan, where you can see it both offense and defensively, and it just seemed like the Packer team was ready to go and we weren't ready to go. I mean, it could be from the standpoint of, like you say, X's and O's a little bit, but it also could feel like a little bit of their team felt like there was a sense of urgency to them getting out there and rolling versus ours, where it did seem like, we weren't ready to match that intensity level. Is that also a little bit of the feeling that you got from it too?
There's definitely a little bit of that going on there. I think that there are certainly some players on this team that were giving effort. There's certainly some players on this team that were engaged. But then you got a guy like Reek Woolen, who to me, that whole game just looked like he didn't really want to be there. Didn't really look like he wanted to try all that hard at anything. And you get what you get in that situation where Jordan Love is not afraid to throw it up there if a receiver gets behind you. And, a few people have pointed out that Woolen's been playing around with that all year. He lets receivers get behind him and thinks he can make up for it. And for the most part, offenses have not really been challenging him. But this offense did, and you saw how bad it can get. So I look at something like that and I go, yeah, there's a little bit of an effort problem here. You look at I hate to say it because he's a 6th-round rookie and everyone's entitled to a bad game, but a guy like Lomia. I look at a guy like Lomia who got completely destroyed in that game, like to a comical degree. And you look at that.
1.6.
Yeah. And you look at that and you go, is this guy just completely incapable of playing football, or was he just not locked in? Feels like a little bit of both, maybe. But
Yeah.
there's definitely some of that going around.
There is, and it's kind of odd to see in a game like this where there was so much riding on the game, Brendan. As far as you could kind of see, and I suppose I don't have to ask you based off this of what we've sort of seen from Olin this year that it's kind of going to be an easy decision on whether or not you'd look to do anything with him. He's not going to be on that line of guys you're looking to give a contract extension to this offseason.
Yeah, I'm not sure I even want him here next year at this point. Personally, I've talked about this a little bit here, but I mean, I guess you can keep him because he's so cheap, right? It's not like it's going to cost you much of anything, but I'm kind of done thinking that he's going to figure this out to the degree that it looked like he was going to figure it out after his rookie season, personally.
Yeah, I've got the same sort of issue as far as the outlook of him right now, beyond just the extension of, I just don't know if he's part of the long-term plan here. Very talented player and has things that he provides that are really nice, Brendan, but you just come back to again and again, man, the deficiencies in his game don't seem to be getting cleaned up. And he's not that dominant enough of a player if we're talking about getting into the spectrum of paying him. First, maybe this offseason being able to offload for some actual legitimate draft capital, not great draft capital, but legit draft capital you could package together to go get like let's say maybe an offensive lineman or an extra offensive lineman in this draft. I found myself drawn more to that direction of it in regards to him.
Yeah. I don't know what kind of trade value you could get for him. He's obviously talented, but there are plenty of talented players in this league that still wouldn't have any trade value. So I'm not convinced that there would be much going on there. But at the same time, there are 31 teams out there, right? You only need one.
You do, and I don't think it's like I don't think you're going to first, second round pick, but can you get a late third? I think you possibly could for him in that range. Some people love his coverage skills and the ability to take away the ball and length and all that, and they'll get enamored by that, and that might be enough. But we'll see too. Yeah, he's had a little bit of a down year overall. I think he's given up like 5 touchdowns, and he's had moments where he's been good too. Like Mike Donald said, it's when it's off, it's off. When he's on, he's on, and it just unfortunately the RPMs go down every once in a while with him on play-by-play basis.
Yeah, and he hasn't been paid yet. That's the weird thing, right? Like this is supposed to happen after you get paid. It's so weird that he would pick now in what is kind of a contract year to just decide, you know what, I don't feel the need to give maximum effort anymore. His agent must be furious.
Well, yeah, and that's where you come back to go, boy, if it's this way before paying, it's only gonna get worse after you pay him. And I like Reek a lot. His skill set's unbelievable, but just it's going in the direction it's heading at this point, and you do have to wonder if it's going to be a long-term part of the plan here with just the up and down nature of his play and how it goes. We also got to see a little bit of Sam Howell in this game, Brendan. We've had a lot of Hawk fans who were clamoring for Howell throughout training camp, and even sometimes at points when Geno was bad this year. I think we thoroughly got to see that he's not anywhere near Geno Smith's level. Are you buying that, or are you just thinking that he was, some people told me, as a young quarterback coming in that just was in over his head a little bit?
I mean, we see quarterbacks enter in the middle of games all the time and play decently and play competently, right? In fact, sometimes you see them play really well because the other team wasn't ready for them. They were preparing all week for the starter. Now they get the backup and they're caught off guard. We see that fairly frequently, I feel like. So I don't think I can brush it off like that.
I can't either with it. I feel like he should have been better prepared to be out there and playing. And that, they showed that stat. I don't know if you saw it, Brendan, where he was since 1990, he's like 14,000 of 32 out of 14,064 of quarterbacks who've had minimum of 15 attempts with his -5 net yards. Yeah. Really, to me, puts it in perspective how bad the quarterback performance was.
Yeah, and I do want to spend a minute talking about that because there are a couple of different layers to that, right? Because yeah, Sam Howell should definitely be roasted for the way he played in that game because he played miserably. He looked like, I use this phrase sometimes to describe quarterbacks that go out there and just look completely incompetent. He looked like the punter. The punter got thrown out there and had to play quarterback for a half because of injuries. And, that's not even an exaggeration. I mean no hyperbole when I say I think Michael Dixon could have done the same thing. Michael Dixon could have gone out there and played like that. Right?
Yeah. I will give a guy rope for coming in tough situations, and the pass rush that he's under is legit. We've said that, and you put anybody else out there outside of Geno that they would collapse, and that's what he did. But I do think you expect a little bit more for a guy that started a full season of games. That's in his third year. I don't think that's something that's a big request that you have a 3.3 quarterback QBR when, like that's, come on,
and it probably should have been worse. Yeah. The pick dropped near the like the 5-yard line.
Had another one tipped up that went right through the guy's hands as the defender's hands. Could have been a third pick there.
Yeah. And, obviously he deserves to be roasted for that. But, there's something else going on here where we know Sam Howell's capable of playing better than that because we saw him play better than that for a year last year, right? He started 17 games last year and he wasn't good. He wasn't even close to good, but he was competent at the basics. He looked like an NFL quarterback. He had 4,000 yards and 21 touchdowns last year. He looked like a real quarterback, a bad quarterback maybe because of all the turnovers and sacks, but he didn't look anything like that. And what it really, I think, serves to highlight is how bad this environment is right now for a quarterback. And the reason why I bring that up, and one thing I've talked about a little bit this week, is that a couple of years ago, when Geno Smith stepped into the starter role and turned into a Pro Bowler, and Russell Wilson went to Denver and became one of the worst quarterbacks in football, I think some people got it in their head that Seattle is just like this fertile breeding ground for elite quarterback play. And I saw, some people suggest that like, oh, any quarterback can go to Seattle and play well. Like look at what Geno Smith was able to do after a decade of being nothing, and look at what happened to Russell when he left Seattle. And maybe at that point in time, that was a little bit true. It's not true anymore. This is not some hotbed for good quarterback play. This is actually a place that is making life much harder for quarterbacks than almost any other team. So we need to get the idea out of our head that just because we have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and JSN, this is easy street for a quarterback. It's the opposite. Everything is working against the quarterback here. We have, I'm sorry, an offensive coordinator who doesn't seem like he really knows what he's doing yet. We have a rookie head coach who's good, but he's a rookie. It's not going to be the same as a guy who's been around for 4 decades like Pete Carroll. You've got this miserable offensive line. And, the receivers, I mean, they're good, but Tyler Lockett's could be anybody right now. So you're not even really leaning on that anymore as like some great example of what we're bringing to bear. So I think that's the main takeaway from that game. This is a really bad situation for a quarterback to be in.
Yeah, it really is, and why it's got to be probably the centerpiece this offseason of getting this corrected before anything else that you would really look to do on this team is get the environment improved, and that's to me beyond even what you look to do at quarterback, but a commitment level on understanding that this has got to be fixed in a major way. And it's a small little half step is not going to do it. You're going to need to really drive this thing home to get this fixed, in my opinion, for as bad as shape as it is, especially that offensive line, which is, I think, the worst it's been throughout Schneider's time. This is the worst year, and that's saying something because there's been some absolute atrocious years as far as that offensive line goes in his history here.
Yeah, and to highlight it, Green Bay is one of the worst pass rushing teams in the league. Like Green Bay came into that game ranked 30th in pressure rate, I think. Yeah. So you're not playing the Broncos here. You're not playing the Steelers here. You're playing a team that really has a hard time getting to the quarterback. And that's the game where your quarterback gets hurt. That's the game where you give up 7 sacks. It's embarrassing. It's humiliating. And John Schneider's talked about how he's felt humiliated as a GM a couple times here in Seattle. This is another time for that.
Hard not to be if he's not. I mean, you look bad when you have something this bad, and it's been this bad for years. You didn't deal with it again this offseason, and now it's at its worst. And if he doesn't deal with the offseason, I'm going to be basically in a nuclear spot as far as things go, because it's just getting so frustrating to watch this happen again and again, and you do nothing about it. So we'll see if they do address it, if they do deal with it, Brendan. But it is horrible how this offensive line's been put together. And I mean, even with Lucas and Cross kind of having a pretty decent day on their side of it, still was just atrocious. You were your worst pass protection all year from a pass block efficiency standpoint. And to your point on Grubb, I don't know why he hates the run game so much. I mean, it's like he's like a cliche spread guy right now, Brendan. The cliche spread guy is the guy that just wants to throw it 95% of the time and only runs it begrudgingly. And that's what he's showing right now as an OC. Like, you can just see he does not want to run the ball at all. At all. He doesn't want to run the ball.
Mike Martin.
Huh? Yeah, he's Mike Martin. Yeah, Mike Martz, basically. And I really don't get it from his standpoint when it does draw the success it does. I mean, you got the Charbonnet run at 25 yards and then completely stopped going to it. We're going to start throwing now. It's time to check it.
Yeah, and even McDonald, who has refrained from doing anything like this all year, kind of called him out in the postgame, talking about how, we felt like we probably should have run it more than we did. And, who's the guy making that decision? So you look at something like that, and one thing that you pointed out a couple weeks ago was that you were going to go with whatever Mike McDonald wanted in terms of keeping Grubb next year versus letting him go. And I did kind of agree with you that he would probably lean towards keeping him. After that game and after listening to what McDonald had to say after the game, I'm not so sure anymore. Like, maybe there's just a disconnect here where maybe on a different team, Grubb would be great. Maybe there's a team out there where Grubb would be really good, but that's not what's going on here.
I don't, and it may. I think in the NFL, you have to have a semblance of balance in what you do, and that you can't just be a team that's going to just try to throw constantly at every given movement and measure that you throw, even if you have a good offensive line. You've got to find that balance. Teams pin their ears back. And it's been, you're right about McDonald bringing it up. It's also not the first time this year he's brought up the fact he wished they would have stayed more committed to the run. And I do believe we agree with you that I think that if we're looking at where this is trending, the fact that he has said this stuff kind of publicly, certain respects almost seems like it's laying the groundwork for eventually pivoting off of him a bit. To mention it multiple times versus just bringing that up behind closed doors and letting it ride in there, and with Grubb, he just seems to have some sort of like I can't go there thing in his play calling game, because it was wild to watch him sit there with Sam obviously over his head. You don't script anything up for him as far as easy throws or rollouts or getting him use his legs. It's such a boring. It's wild to me, Brendan, that this offense is so boring for as open as it was supposed to be and diverse as it was supposed to be. It's like watching just the most rudimentary of offenses. And I understand the line holds it back. I get that part, but Grubb's not also helping matters.
Right. Like the interception that Geno threw. We got 3 receivers in the same area in the back of the end zone. And, you're not at the 2-yard line on that play. You're out at like the 19-yard line. There's no reason why you should have 3 receivers in the same area. That's the main reason why that play doesn't work, because Noah Fant beats his man. There's another man right there because there's another receiver right in the area, right? And you're just trying to figure out what's the logic here. Even if he was at UW with the best receivers and the best offensive line in the country, it wouldn't make that much sense to have a play like that. But
and then also take into account it's 3rd and 9, right? Mm-hmm. So you're in a place where the defense is playing to that depth naturally by the down and distance of the moment. And that's where I think you're absolutely right on this, where I came back to Grubb on that and I said, run a drag route to JSN or DK there. Just throw it to your back. I know you want to get the 9 yards and you're thinking you're pressed, but the problem offensively has not been when we get inside the red zone, we're just taking too many 3 points. The problem inherently with this offense when we get inside the red zone is we have a tendency to turn the ball over this year. So you've got to be aware of that as an OC. And that's that part where there's this brain dead thing with Grubb where he acts like the past hasn't happened. None of this season has occurred up until the moment he's calling his plays. Everything's happening in kind of a vacuum. And I don't really get how he operates from that standpoint, like in that moment where Geno's tendency here, 3rd and 9 is not going to be, if you're operating from probably the 15-yard line and you're in 3rd and 9 NFL-wise, Brendan, and I was to ask you just generally, what do you think the conversion percentage rate is of that across the NFL in those kind of situations, like about the 14-yard line, 3rd and 9, actually getting a first down?
I guess somewhere around like 27%, maybe.
And wouldn't you say that would even be lower for this particular team with how we've operated with our 3rd downs, right? So let's go 15% maybe as a possibility there. And if
maybe you can push it to 20.
Maybe you can push it to 20, but even then, do you like those odds in that moment and versus just take a safe check down play, come out with the field goal? Myers hitting every one of his field goals this year, stay in the game, take the points. Get the points out of it. Don't get nothing out of it. That's what we have too many times happen in these situations is you get nothing out of it. And if you had gotten those 3 points, even as we wound down to the game there, you're within 7 points at one point in time after you get that touchdown with Charbonnet. That's where it's like, it may not be, well, I don't want to get the touchdown. We'll get the touchdown. Yeah, but 3 points can be worth something too. That can be a benefit to you as well on it. And we just, to me on that whole sequence from the play calling to Geno's decision-making is like, what are we doing?
Yeah, and you can go for the first down without running that play, which has no chance. There are other things that you can do. You can go for JSN in the middle of the field. You can a check down to a running back could get the first down. It's unlikely, but it could. Yeah. Like there are other ways you can handle that situation. So I look at that sequence. I looked at early in this game, we had 2 3rd and shorts, and pretty much every route was like 15 yards down the field, and Geno got sacked. And it's like it's like Ryan Grubb got dropped out of a spaceship in the middle of this game, and he has no idea what team he's coaching. Like, he doesn't know.
It's wild to watch, man. It is. I agree. I don't understand how he operates with such a again, it's almost kind of a brain dead nature in how he calls plays. I keep coming back to Randy. He's calling plays for a team he thinks he has rather than the team he actually does have. And that's not how you can operate in those zones. That's not into good OC. Good OC gets the most out of his talent, recognizes the talent he has, and works off of that. But he seems to be like, this is my playbook. I will run my playbook.
Yeah, and it really does feel like every element of this offense has regressed from last year. And the offense last year was not great. It was average. It was an average offense. Even like the some people pointed this out, the screen game. The screen game last year was good statistically. This year it's regressed. About the only thing that works okay are the JSN tunnel screens, and those have gone away. I haven't seen that in a minute. Like we saw it against the Arizona Cardinals for a 50-yard play. since then, it really hasn't been there all that much. So we're not seeing that. The running game has regressed. The only thing that hasn't regressed, ironically, is actually the red zone efficiency. Those numbers are still pretty decent, but it's not. It's still not good. It's like average.
Well, and
That's
even
like
with
the
that,
one thing.
it's got an asterisk with it because you got 4 interceptions in the red zone too. So even if you're efficient with it, you're still turning the ball over down there.
So I don't know. It's really hard for us to know as fans on the outside, but I think Grubb's probably done. I don't think Grubb is going to be coming back next year, and I can't argue against it. That's for sure. Not with these results.
No, I can't either, and I'm a supporter of the guy, and I love the potential of him as an OC, but it's the growth's not happening. Regression, like you mentioned, you just can't overlook that part. But we'll see how Mike McDonald plays it too. Couple donations. Thank you, Feed Me More Seahawks, for a couple double dips here on the dono front. He says, "Why is the narrative we have to be good to show up?"
Oh, this is obviously talking about the fans, right?
Oh yeah, okay. I was wondering on that. Yeah, I was trying to figure out. Yeah, I'll let you first tackle this one.
It's become self-sustaining. It's like a self-sustaining reaction now. It's like a loop that is now powering itself, where fans don't show up because the team isn't good enough. So the team doesn't win, partially because they don't have the fans at home. So the team isn't good enough. And it's like a reaction now. It doesn't need anything else. It just keeps going on its own momentum. And look, I mean, that was a really poor effort on Sunday Night Football at home against the Packers. I understand that some people are going to look at that and say, hey, the fans are justified in not showing up if that's what you're going to give them. But a few weeks ago, I was watching Thursday Night Football, Browns versus Steelers in Cleveland. The Browns are having a terrible season. It's snowing. It's like 20 degrees. That place is still packed. Still got people in the stands trying to affect the game. And they did. They beat the Steelers. This awful Browns team found a way to beat a really good Pittsburgh team. And I look at that and I go, well, what's wrong with us? What makes us so special? It never gets that cold here. It never snows like that here. And the team is never that bad. The team has not been that bad in over 15 years. When was the last time we were as bad as Cleveland is this year? 15 years minimum.
So 2007, maybe, right?
Well, 2008, 2009, I guess.
Yeah, in that area. But that's still quite a long, far time ago, and you've had a couple of Super Bowl appearances in that time too.
Yeah, and you've got this 4-game winning streak. You've got a winning record. Well, to a certain extent, I do think that we have to put this a little bit on the fans, and maybe there's nothing else to say at this point except we have a soft fan base that can't handle adversity.
Well, I think that's definitely where I'm starting to follow myself in alignment of it. And I love my fellow 12s, but this whole, they've got to be good for me to do this. They've got to give me a reason to cheer. They've got to, this mentality of the new 12th man, or because it is a new thing. And I've been here for generations. And one of the benefits of being a guy that's basically been alive since almost about the start of this expansion of this franchise is I've been through different generations of the fandom. I've been through different generations of the team. This whole, the team's got to be good for us to show up thing. This is new on your guys' generation. Wasn't true in the 80s, wasn't true in the 90s. I know we had the dark period in the 90s where there were some blackouts, but that had as much to do with you going to Husky Stadium and playing in Husky Stadium, and the team was also bad on top of that. And it was you had a moment where the team was trying to literally be moved to LA in that mid-90s as well, which caused a lot of fans to get sort of detached as well within that. So there was a lot going on there than just the team being purely bad. But this whole thing of they've got to earn my right. And like you said, you came into this game for them to earn the right. They'd earn the right. They were in first place coming into this game. First place coming into this game. What right do they got to earn at that point when there are 2 weeks left to play? They're in first place and you don't show up. It is. I don't buy their excuse. I think it's weak sauce. And I think it shows a soft fan mentality to lean on that as an excuse for why you do or do not show up to show up your team. And it's also weird how the city somehow with the Mariners, who haven't won jack diddly crap in their whole organization's history, will put 3 million fans in that stadium every summer constantly, even though they suck ass. But this team that's been good, you suddenly have a whole different mentality for when you do or don't show up for a team that only is going to have about 8 home playoff games a year. It just does not make any sense to me, Brendan.
Yeah. And, I hate to say it, but I think I see that attitude permeate even the people who watch my videos and comment on my videos and stuff sometimes, you kind of see the elements of a fan base that can produce a result like that, where we lost that game on Sunday, and I'm getting comments the next few days saying, oh, we should just tank the last 3 games. Who cares? Let's just lose. Who cares? Even if we make the playoffs, we're going to lose. And it's like, what is wrong with you? This team is 8-6. This team is out of the division by a tiebreaker. They're literally tied with the team that's in the divisional lead. They're behind by the tiebreaker because they lost to the Rams. And it's like, and you're talking about like, oh, let's just throw these games away. No, these games are valuable. Okay. You only get 17 of them a year. Yeah. And it would be one thing if we were 2-12 and we were trying to keep up with the Raiders and Giants. Okay. I could kind of get it then, but I can't believe how many comments I'm getting from people just saying, oh, just give up. Just throw these games away. Just lose. We need the 14th pick instead of the 18th pick. Like, that's going to make any kind of a difference. And you read those comments, you see that mentality, and you're like, yeah, these are the kinds of people who would refuse to go to the game because the team doesn't meet their ridiculously high standard. These are the fans, these are the people who need the team to win 15 games a year, or it's not worth their time. If you're not winning 15 games a year, you should be losing 15 games a year. And it's not a healthy way for a fan base to be. I'm sorry. That's a very toxic attitude to have.
Agreed. And I think it's leading to as well the dying off of the 12th man. That's this continues as a general trend. If this mentality continues as a general trend, the 12th man will be no more. You can still call him that and all that, but the home field advantage has been lost there. It's nowhere near as loud as it once was, and it will continue to trickle out the door if we continue to act like this is an okay mentality to operate from as a fandom. I'm not a guy that likes to tell people how to operate in their fandom, but that sort of defeatist attitude, that's when I'll definitely put my foot down and go, this has no place in our fandom. This is not going to be good for the team long-term operating like this in your mentality. And, but it is what it is too. I don't know if it's changing anytime, soon on that one, Brendan. Feed me with another $2 donation. So did you guys see the Woody Johnson Madden trade?
I did see this actually. So apparently Woody Johnson, the Jets had the opportunity to trade for Jerry Jeudy before the season started. And he said no because his Madden rating wasn't high enough. That was literally the logic he used.
Oh my God. Isn't Marshawn Lynch the ratings coordinator this year for Madden? So Woody Johnson, so Marshawn Lynch is the reason the Jets aren't.
Yeah. Oh, well, okay, I'm reading now. Apparently he vetoed the trade. So the trade was in place. It was ready to go. And Woody Johnson vetoed it because his Madden rating was too low. Well, at least that's not our owner, right? Like, even after a game like that, you can say, at least we don't have that owner.
Yeah, it's very true.
Our owner probably doesn't know how long our players' packages are either. So that's good too, right?
I would hope so. I would hope that she's not measuring them up in the locker room there with a ruler. I would hope that with Jody. No, let me rule it. Just hold still. But yeah, so that's wild. Some of these owner stories you hear, I mean, these owners, man, when you get to be billionaires, you just do what you want, some of these guys just they just literally operate in their own little bubble of, I do what I want when I want. And I don't know how these owners that are billionaires that have this kind of fingerprints over the organization like this, and they have an organization that hasn't won for a long period of time. I don't know how they don't look themselves in the mirror and go, yeah, I'm a bit at the forefront of these problems. I'm one of the leading issues for why we're not doing this because of stuff like this. It's probably why it's getting leaked out. It's probably people in the Jets organization is probably trying to shake him up to get him to realize that this stuff's got to stop if they're going to hope to be good.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure he won't veto the Kirk Cousins trade they're going to make this offseason.
Nope, probably not.
It's coming.
I wouldn't shock me. It'd be a Jets move to make, man. It'd be a very Jets kind of go for it kind of deal. We'll pivot off this to this one. It's like the Colts did a couple years ago where they kept going from one old quarterback to the next.
Yeah. At least those guys were cheap. Kirk Cousins won't be cheap.
That's true. Well, he's only on the hook for the base at that point. The salary, the bonus will go off the books for the Falcons on it. But yeah, he's done though. He looks just finished.
Yeah, Joe Flacco is probably better than Kirk Cousins at this point.
He might be. I mean, you got to wonder if I've wondered all year if he's really come back off that Achilles injury where he was. And he's an older player, man. You get that Achilles injury late in your career. I mean, it's affected, I think, Rodgers a bit as well. And it's bad. It's not a good injury if you're in your prime, much less as your career is starting to wind down. BLVK, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, retire the Color Rush uniforms. Just a bad aura. I'm 100% with this myself. I could do without the color rush anymore.
Yeah. I think Wolf Gray was better than this. We should bring back Wolf Gray.
Wolf Gray. Let's go.
Yeah, that was better. That was the one we retired for the throwbacks, I think. So just bring it back, get rid of the color rush, and I think you're better off.
Yeah, I don't like the color rush at all as well. There's no aura to it. It's really bright, and I don't understand the draw. The people that love it really love it, but it's a very small contingent of the Hawk fan base that actually love it. And we have these two great other uniform options, being the throwbacks and the Wolf Grays at our fingertips. Why go toss those away for something that's less? Doesn't make much sense to me.
Didn't we have orange jerseys that one year?
They weren't, those are the worst ones. I think
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
That's the nut low, right? That's the nut low.
That was the worst of the jersey in Seahawks history. That one right there. Yeah, those were awful. And so, there's somebody in the department that loves the green color. I bet that the same person that made that green on full display, that's probably the same one who came up with these color rushes, because they just have this fascination with this color green. It's like, it's such an unusual color of green. Put it everywhere. Put it everywhere. Like, no. It hints, accents, you know what I mean? Accent it. Agree though, BL. Agreed, and thank you for that donation. Marty McFly with a couple of double dip $12 donations for us. Thank you for the double dip donation, Marty McFly. You. Very kind of you, man. Really, really appreciated. No message in your donos, just the double dip of the $12. So you're very kind for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty.
I love the Back to the Future thing there going on too, by the way. Thomas Cox, thanks for the $5 donation. Who's more at fault for the offense failing, John Schneider or Ryan Grubb?
I think I would probably go with Grubb right now. I don't think Grubb is maximizing this. And the offensive line was terrible last year, and Waldron did a better job than Grubb is doing right now. And Waldron's not good. I mean, Waldron will probably never work as an OC in the NFL again, right? Like, it's hard to believe.
I can't imagine.
Ever. Yeah.
No, I don't see how that's possible. I might be a little bit on the different area of you on this. Let's try to figure out it, Brendan. So let's just say last year our offense was 13th or something in the NFL overall, right? Just take all this and then come out to about 13th. You know what, we're probably maybe like 19th, 18th, 19th this year, something like that.
I think if you boil it down to like points per drive, we're like 22nd, and last year we were like 15th.
Okay, so it's about a 7.
You have the right general idea.
So I think Grubb's got blame here in getting the reverse out. I think especially when you take a Damian Lewis and you go to Laken Tomlinson at left guard, for instance. I think you take yourself from a league average place at that position to a league worst at that position, and that's a big step back. I think that the right tackle position this year has been by and large probably worse than it was last year. Stone, I think, had a worse year this year than he did last year for the games that he was playing. I think that Grubb's got responsibility and could have done way more. I don't think that you're wrong on that, so I'm not pushing back on that. I just would put more responsibility on John Schneider because he has fielded this offensive line that is one of the worst in football. It's been one of the worst in football for years over. You've invested as little of money as anybody in the NFL in the sport in the offensive line. You could see this problem coming, is what I'm saying, Brendan. You know, this was not one that caught them unaware or off guard, or they had tried to, really reinforce it. They didn't really try to reinforce it. They continued to try to go bare minimum on it, and it has sunk this whole offense time and time again, game after game after game. And I have a hard time of letting John off the hook on that one.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's made a lot of mistakes here, very clearly. But I think Grubb is doing even a worse job trying to mitigate it. I really do.
That's
and
fair.
I wouldn't have said that, 3 weeks ago, I don't think. I wouldn't have said that 3 weeks ago, but I mean, the Cardinals game was good, right? But the Cardinals game was good because the players just kind of played better. Like, nobody touched Geno that whole game. Geno got hit like maybe twice that whole game. Sometimes the players just bring it.
Yeah.
So I don't even know how excited I can get about that. But I look at the abandoning of the run game. I look at the way that, teams know what we're doing pre-snap because we don't mix it up enough out of these formations. The formation gives away what the play is going to be way too much. And it's too late in the season to fix that, really. Like, you need to be varying things up throughout the season. So when you get to the end of the year, you get into certain formations and the other team doesn't know what to expect. Feels like we run the ball out of this formation. We throw the ball out of this formation. We only do play action out of this formation. And there's no fear as a defense that, oh, they're going to throw something different at us now.
No, it's like the old under center thing, right? Where under center, if we go play action, we never give the ball to the running back. It's always play action. So the defense always leans on it being a pass play in those moments. To your point on that, and yeah, it's definitely been a part of what we've seen from this team. Is the predictability's been a big part of what's hurt them on top of it. So certainly Ryan Grubb's not help matters. It's been kind of to me a bit of a bad on bad sort of situation with that a bit, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty bad on both sides of it. I admit that it's close, but I'm a little more frustrated with Grubb at this point than I am Schneider.
Yeah,
because at least in the case of Schneider, you can at least say there's a lot of dead money. There's only so much you can do in one off season, and we even said that during the off season. You can't fix every single problem with this team in one off season. So I kind of get that, and. Us being down to our fourth string right tackle is not anybody's fault. I want to be clear about that. That was bad luck. People kept getting hurt. You were down to literally your fourth string right tackle. That's not anyone's fault. It's also not really anybody's fault that Connor Williams has this, I don't know. I guess
let me push back a little on the fourth string thing because we didn't know when Lucas was coming back. And you signed George Fant, who was a guy in his mid 30s. The thing who had an injury history. Yeah, you got to your fourth string tackle, but you also kind of not really because those things were sort of there where George is a guy that much likely a chance there he's injured. And we hope Lucas would be back within 4 or 5 games. Turns out it's well over half a season. So you're going to rely on a 32, 33-year-old George Fant to get you through over half a season there at the position and hope it could work. That's where I go. There's a little bit of that, you could. And again, he did spend money in different places that could have been offshoot. The Noah Fant money could have been put somewhere else to an offensive line position. There's some of those deals that was given out, considering what happened with Dodson and Baker. I think that there would have been a way. It's that whole thing he did. I went back and looked at it again, Brendan, where his tendency to do these 1-year deals in off seasons, 1 year or 2-year deals that are really 1-year deals, like the Rashawn Jenkins deal or like the Noah Fant deal. Those are 1-year deals. That's what those really are. They're 1-year deals. And so he does is he stacks these 1-year deals up. You sign 9 guys on 1-year deals that are actually decent money, all of them, and you end up eating all of your cap space up. And yeah, there's dead money there, but you're also doing things from a step standpoint to cause this and make this happen by the structure of the contracts you're giving out because you want to kind of hand out these prove it deals, which aren't really working, by the way. The prove it deal concept isn't and hasn't been really working when you've been trying to use it. I go back to 2020 when I looked at it, Brendan, where $50 million. Remember that year with $50 million with Greg Olsen, Cedric Abuhi, Bruce Irvin, Benson Mayowa, Brandon Jackson. I mean, I can go through all the names, but that's what you do is you don't get the actual value and put it into the position a bit. And I'm not saying that it was going to be hard to address it. It was. I think that you're valid in saying that, but I'm just saying that he also short sold it. You're spending as less money as anybody in the league on your offensive line right now.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely something to be said there, but I just don't want to act like I thought the Connor Williams thing was bad. When we signed Connor Williams, I thought it was a great idea. I loved it. And I don't want to pretend like, oh, I always knew that was going to be bad and not going to work out. And it was a terrible idea because, I do think that was a good idea. It just didn't work out. I thought the George Fant thing was okay. Didn't work out. I hated Laken Tomlinson, and that ironically has worked out better than either of those things. Still hasn't worked out, but I'm trying to make sure I'm not doing the revisionist history thing where I'm acting like, oh, I knew all this was going to fail. I didn't.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's fair. And I like the Connor Williams signing with the 2. So it is just that there is a certain track he's taken on this stuff at times where, you'd like to see a little bit more of the true investment rather than just trying to go as cheap as humanly possible, which seems to be sometimes what John's trying to do on the line.
Right.
Taker 610, thank you for the $2 donation. John Jackson Smith and Jigba's first 2 years, he's had Waldron and Grubb. Yeesh. Grubb's done a pretty good job. I think Grubb hasn't done a lot of great stuff, but I think one of the good things he has done is more unlocked GSM.
Yeah. If there's one thing he's done well, it's use the middle of the field. And I look at Gino's pass chart every week. Every week he's spamming the middle of the field, which I love. Yeah. I think that is modern football. So that's the one thing that I like with Grubb, but he's not the only offensive coordinator in the world who can do that. right? There are other offensive coordinators who are going to come in and be like, yeah, middle of the field. That makes sense.
Yeah. Or how, to your point out, OCs that know how to put a centerpiece point with a slot guy and be able to really work him and make him dynamic, like a number one receiver. There's plenty of guys like that can do that in their systems and schemes and just the way it's set up. They don't even have to force it. It's just in their system to do it. So, yeah, maybe he'll be on to his third OC here by next year at this point, Taker.
Yeah.
Thank you for the donation. DVN, thank you for the $10 donation, DVN. Very kind of you. As an East Coast fan, it's sad to see. My wife and I had dreams of one day going to Lumen. We went to the Falcons game and got loud with no intention of winning off of a losing streak, and we took over. Shaking my head. Hurts the heart for me, DVN. I'm sure it does for Brendan too on this. It hurts the heart to see this thing go away because it's such a unique thing in fandom. This isn't just something to the NFL. It's something, Brendan, that's unique to sports. And that we had a fandom back in the 80s, late 70s that realized that they could affect the game if they all in unison got as loud as they possibly could. And it was an amazing environment to be in when you're in the midst of it, to feel it. And that it's starting to drain and go away, and that the new generations are not going to get to experience it like we once did, is really sad, because it was something that was so special, and not just for football, but for sports. But it is the way it's heading.
Yeah. And, I was having this discussion with some people on Twitch about this a couple days ago. This isn't a transplant city. That's the excuse that Arizona has, right? Phoenix is a transplant city, so of course they can't get a lot of fans in there. But I don't think Seattle's there. It's just really confusing how it got here. But again, I look at the attitude some people have post in my comment section, and I'm like, yeah, I can see how this fan base got to this point where everything is too. Everybody's trying to be a technician. Everybody's trying to everybody's trying to look at things too clinically, I feel like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's fair. I think too, just it's the support. The team's got to have the support of the team. And like you said earlier on this, it's one thing if you're 2-11, 3 in this, 4 in that, season after season of just being a crap ass team. That's one thing. And that's one where I can get a frustration over time with the fan base going, come on. But when you have been a team that's been pretty good, when you've gotten to 2 Super Bowls in the last 10 years, I think that's where you got to kind of take a little bit of a grain of salt with some of that kind of criticism and go, let me step back on this one just a little bit with this one with some perspective.
Yeah. And I don't like it. I don't like it at all. And I don't know what it's going to take to get it better. I know that there are a couple of sports stadiums out there, like the Falcons Stadium. What is it? Mercedes-Benz Dome. Mm-hmm. And now the Phoenix Suns are doing this too, where they've made food in the stadium extremely cheap to try to get more fans to come in. And maybe that's part of it. Maybe you just say, look, we'll make our money on ticket sales. We'll lose money on food. And it's cool. We'll do that in order to get more fans in. We'll make up for it. But short of something like that, I don't even know how you get the conversation started.
Yeah, I don't know how this gets changed either, Brendan, because it does go up. This is somewhat of a league-wide issue. And you have, the NFL doesn't want to necessarily do anything about this, right? Because they want to have their season tickets sold. And if you have people that are going to commit to buying season tickets, even if they're going to sell some of those tickets during the year, that's that many more season tickets that are on the book as being sold. And then you only have so many tickets in every stadium then that are your day game sales, right? So if you have, 25, 30,000 of season ticket holders, then you got 30,000 tickets left that you sell on game day, versus if you didn't allow for the resale and now you're only selling 15,000 season ticket holdings, and now you got to come up with an extra 15,000 you sell on game day. Well, now you're going to risk having blackouts. And the NFL has been down that road before with organizations, and that's what they don't want, is have to black these games out in the local areas. So I don't know how this changes, because, Brendan, let's face it, if you get to late season, and let's say we take this stuff out of the people being able to resell, and you have a team that's Carolina Panthers right now, mm-hmm. You're going to have empty seats. You're going to have a blackout.
Right.
There's really kind of no way around that on it. And I just don't think the NFL wants to go down that road. And
yeah. I think we missed a super chat here, by the way. If you scroll up, Thomas Cox, $5 on your end.
My bad.
You guys?
Yeah, let me get back on that. Thank you, though, DVN, and hopefully it does come back, man. Just because it's gone now doesn't mean it's gone forever. If they start to take maybe some steps in here and recognize it as an issue, we can start to correct it. But the ownership's got to recognize the issue is here, and that they got to actually do something about it. They can't just sit on their hands and hope it goes away.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Thomas Cox, thank you for the $5 donation. I appreciate you for that. Sorry we missed you on the above one there, Thomas. Can you guys give me options as a realistic OC that is not McDaniel, Stefanski, and no head coach like Peterson Daboll? Shouldn't continuity matter?
I mean, it definitely does. But at a certain point, you have to wonder if that continuity is even something you want. Like, if the guy's not good, the guy's not good. And normally, I might be in a position of like, let's just be patient, see what year 2 looks like, give this some time. But I think they're going to be like this lists out. There are some really intriguing names that could be available this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's looking for some names outside of these ones that we would be looking at, I think, at the forefront, Thomas, because the guys that you're mentioning are the guys that, would be the ones, if you're moving Grubb, you're going to want to get a certain guy that's got what you're looking for is the opposite of Grubb, the person that's got the experience and background in the NFL, who's got a successful history in being an OC. And you're not looking on, going for one of those guys. So if you're looking at us grabbing other names at that point, it's going to be grabbing names that are guys like Pete's of the Rams, who's, been in, that's the OC, but it's McVay is really the OC, that there's some untestedness there and going at those guys, Thomas. So I think that really at the heart of it, I'm not trying to pivot off your question. For me, I'll see what Brendan's got, if he's got a couple of ideas on guys, but you're pivoting off Grubb, not to go to another unknown. You're pivoting off the unknown to go to a known, I think. And continuity does matter, and I'm with that. But Brendan brings up the point on this with Grubb. There's a couple of issues that have gone on throughout this year that are disconcerting for the long term. And I've been a pro Grubb guy and wanting to let this play out, Thomas. But him and the coach not being on the same page as far as the running game, his inability to work around the pass protection and keep staying in these sort of long developing routes because that's what he wants to do. There's been a lack of adjustment on his part that's discouraging as far as looking in the future, because you wonder if that's going to continue to be part and parcel of what you get with him as an OC, even if you get the offensive line in the right place. And then now you start to go, well, that can eventually hold us back in a major way, not in the way that it keeps us from being a good team, but keeps you from being a great team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm still a big fan of Frank Reich. If you could get him out of retirement, I think that he would be great. Somebody like that. That's somebody who's had tremendous success in this league as an OC and even had moderate success as a head coach. So he's overqualified to be a offensive coordinator at this point. You could honestly, and people are, some people aren't going to like this, but I even think you could go get somebody like a Brian Schottenheimer and get better results than this. I don't know if he would ever make you hyper elite, but Brian Schottenheimer produced pretty good results every year he was here. He was here 3 years. We had a top 10 offense all 3 years. We didn't get away from the run game the way Grubb is. We had a good running game all 3 of those years. And some of our best offensive lines of the John Schneider era were in those 3 years. Now, maybe you could say that was because of Mike Solari, who was the offensive line coach at that time, but you could look at something like that. You could look at somebody like, if you do want to go in the more unknown area, maybe you could go get somebody like a Clint Kubiak in New Orleans, who I imagine New Orleans is going to blow up everything this offseason. Maybe you could pick up him. There are options out there, and that's just the big name guys. That's just the guys that I know about off the top of my head.
Yeah. No, I wish I had more names kind of for the secondary point, but I've been concentrating more of the bigger names from my standpoint, Thomas, and just I want to get something that's legitimate if we're going to go this route. And that means something that is more of a known quantity. Otherwise, just roll with Grubb if it's unknown to unknown.
Yeah. I don't know. I really like the McDaniel idea. That guy will scheme up a run game that throws everything at these opposing defenses. And to me, the problem with McDaniel is he doesn't have the chutzpah to be a head coach.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I worry about him a little bit with the just everything's easy going, easy peasy. I feel like that guy's gets up in the morning and smokes like 3 blunts and then goes to his job and just, man, just whatever, man, it's just, it is what it is, man. And I'm not against a guy that's doing that stuff, but it's also like, you hear the stories coming out of Miami about the lack of discipline, the lack of intensity, some of the cupcake practices that they have. And you go, is that the mentality we want to drive for here? I'm not out on Brendan. I'm just saying I have some hesitancy on this one a little bit.
Okay, let me run this past you. What if it's not a new OC? What if Grubb needs like a consigliere or just as an example, I remember several years ago it was Norv Turner. Norv Turner, after his time as an OC or head coach in the NFL, became like an assistant.
He's doing out for his
Yeah,
son.
in where is that? Where's the Turner son? Shoot, is he in Cincinnati? No.
It's that or Tennessee, right? Isn't it? Is that or Tennessee?
Right. Like you need somebody like that, somebody who's been around the block, he's seen everything. He doesn't want to be an OC anymore, but he's like your, Tom Hagen. Okay? Like maybe somebody even like a Mike McCarthy who clearly shouldn't be a head coach anymore, probably doesn't want to be an OC anymore, but he's seen everything and he can kind of balance out the rougher edges around somebody like a Ryan Grubb who just got here. Somebody like that. Maybe that's the solution instead of just getting a new OC. And maybe you just bring in that consigliere. And I'm probably mispronouncing that, but you know what I'm saying.
Oh, you pronounce it right. I think it's a possibility. It's teams have done in the past, like you say, and maybe it's the way that they look here on this as an alternative to going fully through. So I think you got to be open to all possibilities and options to getting this fixed, and that's certainly one that other teams have taken as well. I mean, even this year with McDonald, right? He's got that kind of in Leslie Frazier for the defensive side of the ball, and I'm sure that's been very helpful for him having that guy over the head of him in that way to provide him some of that foresight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or another name, Kafka, because the Giants are going to probably blow it up this offseason. What if it's Kafka?
A guy they liked a lot. I think a guy they were trying to get as an OC last year. So I think that's a smart name to bring up, Brendan, because that's a guy that there was already some playing, hey, I want you to try over. I think they were really trying to get him over here as an OC last year for McDonald, and they couldn't quite pull him in that way. But remember, because New York gave him like I think an assistant head coach, or they gave him a pay raise increase or something like that.
Yeah.
When we were trying to do that. So that's a good name, man. That's definitely a guy that might be a possibility here.
Yeah, I like Kafka, by the way. I like him. I think that he is the main guy responsible for making Daniel Jones look like a guy who could get a $160 million contract at one point. And, we've now seen that guy is not worth $16 million. So, there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, I'm open to it with that guy. And the team seemed to like him quite a bit last year and doing it. So I'm sure they've done their homework with the guy. And, there's a reason that that they were looking at him in that way. Upo, thank you for the $10 donation. Upo says, hey guys, just wanted to say happy holidays and I appreciate the content. Cleveland fans, Pittsburgh fans, and Green Bay fans would never choose a higher draft pick over a win. Go Hawks, always.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Very
Upo.
true. Thank you. Bye, Upo. Happy holidays to you and yours as well. I hope everyone out there has a great Christmas holiday and happy New Year. And you're right. I think that there are fan bases wouldn't have been wired as much to be in this way with it. And what'd you call it, Brennan? Everyone's trying to be a technician a little bit. And
it's this thing where people sit in a dark room and they're like, oh, if the Seahawks lose this game, they have a 1.2% better chance of getting an elite player at pick number 15 instead of pick 17. So therefore, because the playoff odds only move by 2.4%, we should root for the team to lose. That's what it feels like. People think they're trying to be smart here. People think they're trying to like beat the system. They're trying to be, they're trying to moneyball it as a fan. Like by saying we should root for the team to lose every game for the next 3 years so we can get the number 1 overall pick every year. And then we'll get blue chippers and then we'll win the Super Bowl immediately. And it's like, no, you're trying to like be this technician. You're trying to bring like math into being a fan. Just be a fan. Just root for the team to win. 98% of the time, just be a fan. It's okay. And yeah, maybe the day will come one day when we're 2-12 and we need to lose these last 3 games to get the number 1 pick and get, the next Caleb Williams or the next, John Elway or whatever. Okay. That's a little different.
It's a far cry from being first place with 2 weeks winding down.
But, I got to be honest. I see these comments of people just throwing in the towel or trying to argue why we should throw in the towel. And it's just, I don't know. I find it to be kind of pathetic. It's like, God, we're tied for first place. Yeah.
It's like you said, they're operating with them like your 2 wins versus being in first place. And it's kind of wild to watch where it's like, usually when fans are first place, you're celebrating. You're like, hey, we're in this, we're fighting. So it's weird. It's kind of a bit of a strange thing. That's what we're trying to wrap our heads around, I think, folks, on that. But Upo, it sounds like you're in the same pathway on this one.
And like, this is another great example. The Browns, how many number 1 overall picks did they have? How many times did they pick in the top 5? Are they anywhere? No. Yeah. Pittsburgh never picks in the top 10 ever. Pittsburgh never almost picks in the top 15. When was the last time Pittsburgh picked in the top 12? I think literally maybe not since,
like Roethlisberger or something.
yeah, like Tommy Maddox, right? Tommy Maddox was the last quarterback to lead them to a bad season. That team is way, way better than Cleveland over the last 15 years in terms of having success. Does Green Bay ever pick in the top 10? I don't think so.
Nope. I don't think so either. It's tankless. We've said many times over, tanking doesn't work. We get it brought up to us a lot. People advocate with us a lot on both of our channels. And every time we come back and say it doesn't work, we've looked at the data and the information, and it does not work. It's a theory thing where in theory it would work, but in practicality it does not.
Yeah. If a team needs to healthily kind of flush away a season a little bit, if they need to rebuild, okay, that's one thing. But it's another thing to root for the team to lose. Like, I would rather have a 6-win team with like the 11th overall pick than a 1-win team with the number 1 overall pick, because the number 1 pick doesn't have anything. The team with 1 win has nothing in place. They've got no good players. They've got to do everything. At least the 6-win team has something to get to 6 wins, right?
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's not good. But I think what they're thinking is that you go to the 2 wins but you are a 6-win team really, and it just doesn't kind of work that way. It's a again thing versus theory versus actual practice. Real life, it just doesn't work well.
Right.
Thank you again, Upo. Very kind of you. DVN you two on those big donos. Feed me more Seahawks. Thank you for the $2 donation. Brendan Nelson, do you feel our D-line was overcommitting?
I think it can look like that because of all the misdirection that Green Bay was doing. Like, I think Green Bay ran that play 6 times where Love gets the ball out of shotgun, then he goes back like he's going to throw it, and then he gives it to the running back, and they were doing the thing where they would run like the jet sweep after looking like they're going to do a normals inside zone handoff. It can look like that. I don't know if we were, but maybe.
Yeah, I felt a little bit like I felt in tape. We had guys in some of the games and some good amount of the plays just doing a little bit too much, just trying to get, especially in the run game, trying to get into the backfield and they lose their gap integrity. And you got an open door now because you're trying to just do a little bit too much. It got better as the game went along, I thought, but definitely early on, it seemed like there was just a little bit too much of stretching, but that was a question for you more than me. Thomas Cox, thank you for the $5 donation and all of your support today, Thomas. The defense gave up 20 points before halftime, but Grubb is to blame? I don't get it.
Oh, I mean, I don't think we can defend the defense that much in that game either. I thought they were terrible. It was 14-0 before you could blink. And Green Bay scored points every time they touched the ball in the first half. I'm not defending the defense, but that doesn't mean Grubb is doing his job either. That doesn't mean the offense is doing well either. Both can be true very easily.
Yeah, and it's part of this, Thomas, comes into the stuff that's led into this game too as well. So, this isn't just about this particular game existing and it's a one-off state. It also is about what's been the trend from Grubb that we've seen this year. What's been the defensive trend? And Thomas, walking into this game, I think your defense was up to had climbed all the way to 11th in points allowed. They had been improving. They'd had plenty of games where they've been close to dominant. I don't think there's been any game points in the games this year offensively where we've looked at our offense and said they've been dominant. And that's where it's been. And as well, when you went through this game, the defense found some answers. They found some stops. They turned the ball over for the offense, and the offense time and time again couldn't get it done. It's also, as I always say with this, Thomas, whenever we drive to simplicity is in assessment is where you're always going to find me pulling back away from that and going, nothing in football tends to be very simple or straightforward. And so with this on being, well, defense gives up 20 points, they're really the head of this happening. So simplified wise, the blame should be on them at the forefront. And then the offense just did what they kind of did. That's sort of simplifying it. First, let's get into the details of this. You're 3rd and 2. Why are you running long developing routes? Where is the commitment to the running game? Why is it on a 3rd and 9 from the 14-yard line when you've had all these issues in the red zone? You're going back to trying to have Geno hold on the ball in a deep developing route and throw it into the end zone. You know how this is going to turn out. It's the details within this as well that matter, Thomas, more than it is just one single stat that we might point to on this and say, this is this. It's what happened prior to coming into this game. It's all of that included to make the full assessment of a guy like Grubb. And so I'm not letting the defense off the hook either, as Brendan did. They didn't play a good game either as well, but they've been much better this year. And McDonald has turned this unit around from where they were last year, because let's not forget, this was like a league worst unit last year that, like I said, coming into this game this deep into the season, had you about 11th in points given up coming into this game. So he brought this thing around.
I mean, if the Seahawks had played that game on Sunday exactly as it went, but they went into that game with like a top 8 offense, I don't think we'd be having these conversations. I think we'd just be like, oh, well, that was weird. Anyway, let's move on. But that's not what's happened. We've had an offense that, I mean, they played really well the previous week against the Cardinals. Okay, right? That was a good game. That maybe was the best game of the year. But then you've got like the Jets game where the offense was, And then you've got, games like the Bills where the offense does nothing. You've got games against like the, 2 games against the Niners where things didn't flow right. You got that ridiculous Giants game, which gets worse and worse with every passing week. So we're not just looking at one game here when we're talking about the offense.
No, it's the totality of the whole season coming into this, and that there was more things going on in this game, Thomas, that were trends that had bled over from other prior games. And if they're trends, you wonder, are they inherently a part of Grubb's game as an OC? And if they're inherently part of Grubb's game as an OC, then he's not here to be the answer long term. And I don't think McDonald's got those same sort of inherent failings within his own game on the defensive side of the ball in the same kind of way. That has me worried. And we're both still at the point, Thomas, with Grubb, that we're not calling for anybody's job on or anything like that. But, the blame is rightfully placed on this one to a large degree, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you, Thomas. Appreciate you, brother. Phoebe Moore Seahawks, thank you for the $2 donation. It says 3rd and 2 and we go for a shot. Pretty much sums it up. And it's not, again, happened many times this year. I can't tell you how many countless times we've been in 3rd and 1 and 3rd and 2 and we're sitting in shotgun and Gino holds the ball for 3, 4, 5 seconds looking deep down the field and you've got no outlet options. It's happened time and time again this year.
Yeah. They were showing the cut up of the 3rd and 2 play early in this game. Maybe it was like a 3rd and 3, but you got 3 routes that are 15 yards down the field. And then you've got like the tight end is the one quick developing route. He's covered. It's basically just a really quick curl route. There's not much to it. And I think the running back is running like a wheel route. I think Charbonnet was running a wheel route on that play, if I remember correctly. And it's like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. If you had an elite, if you were the Lions and you have an elite offensive line and you're going to go for it on 4th and 2 and just try to bang it past the chains for a first down, it's different. But that's not what you have. You have a team that can't go for it on 4th and 2 pretty much ever because of their personnel. So, coach your personnel.
Yeah, I agree. And this is just one of those little spots. Drives me nuts with it. Drives me crazy where it's like, take the short route, take the short play, get the first down, keep the chains moving. You're a spread system. You're supposed to have these concepts built within what you do, not be just completely obsessed with pushing the ball down the field at all times, which has been sometimes the case with this team, I feel like.
Tom Brady built like his entire career out of just taking the quick, easy pass.
It's there. It's there a lot of the time, but you have to stay committed to it. And a lot of these OCs, a lot of quarterbacks in this league just can't do that. They want to get greedy. They want to push the ball. They don't want to be patient. And, this is what defenses, Brendan, with them playing the cover 2 shell now, this is what they're forcing you to do, is the deep stuff's getting taken away. They're going to force you to earn your way up the field. So you've got to lean into that, I think.
Right.
Stimpy has been celebrating 16 months, I think, as a member on your channel on this one, I think.
No, this is you. This
is me. Well, thank you, Stimpy, for 16 months on my channel. I appreciate you for that. He says, I was at the game and achieved my goal of losing my voice and was able to make the 2 Packer fans next to me visibly annoyed every time we were on D. Let's go.
Yeah, at least somebody did. That's good.
At least somebody did. It was you and I think about 4 other people in the stadium this past Sunday, Stimpy. But well done on your part. I know that folks that watch both me and Brendan's channel are not going to be part of these folks that aren't going to do all they can when they're in that stadium. We know you guys are going to be bringing it. We just have to have everybody in the stadium bring it and stop selling their tickets to the opposition.
Right. Congratulations, Stimpy. You accomplished more than the team did on Sunday, I guess.
Amen. And thank you for that long time support, brother. Appreciate you. Jeffrey Thistle, thank you for the $5 donation. It says Major League Baseball needs a hard cap in a big way. Half the teams don't matter because they can't outspend the other half. Why does no one talk about this? Seems obvious.
I feel like most baseball fans don't really care. They don't mind the Yankees and Dodgers being and the Mets being the top dogs every year. I feel like, maybe the sport's even better off when those teams are the teams that are always playing for the World Series.
Could be. I think Major League Baseball just doesn't really care about their sport to too much of a degree. They've made certain adjustments here, but they don't care. The other thing is the baseball player union is the strongest union in all of sports. So, they're not going to ever allow a cap to come into play. And I don't think the ownership has the balls to strike or hold them out to force it to happen. I agree with you. It needs to happen. It's made me check out of the baseball season. I don't know how you can be a Mariner fan right now and look at this team and go, they've got any chance other than they can stuff a camel through the eye of a needle in order to get themselves to a World Series. That's the only way that that's happening. And I don't understand how you can, as a fan, look at that and say, well, that's possible. This is feasible. Yeah, we got a realistic chance of getting there to this. You got no chance. The reason you haven't been to a World Series in 50 years, you've operated from that same mentality time and time again. It hasn't worked. So you're right. It seems obvious, man, Jeffrey, but I just don't think Major League Baseball cares.
Yeah, I think they're happy with like they like the Dodgers winning 110 games every year because that team draws a lot of attention. And there are a lot of Dodgers fans out there, and they're just like, okay, it's fine. Did you hear about the new rule proposal from baseball?
No.
The golden bat.
What's this?
So the rule proposal is once a game, each team will be able to pick any batter on their team to bat at any point. So like if the team has the bases loaded and they're down by 2 in the bottom of the 9th with 2 outs, they can just go, hey, we want Ohtani to take this at bat.
No.
It's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's a swirling the drain kind of move. And I mean, I think in my opinion right now, Brendan, in general, I think football rides high in the hog, but I think when it comes to basketball and baseball, they've got some very big worries going into the future as far as, those sports have been around for a long time and people might think that they might last forever, but I'm old enough to know that as I was growing up, horse racing, boxing, good amount of sports that were popular at one time that stopped being popular as I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And boxing in this country was at one time as big a sport as just about anything in the 60s and 70s. And so, these Major League Baseball and basketball might be thinking that they've got their spot set. Well, okay, we're number 2, we're number 3, but but I'll tell you what, that's old generations of fans on baseball right now. That's who is your major fans on that. It's not the younger kids coming up. And with basketball, that game has gotten so boring. I mean, this is why we don't have a Sonic team. They can't afford to expand right now. That's the reality here. They would have put a Sonic team back in here by 21, but they're regressing. There's retention going on right now with basketball. So it's, those teams are playing with fire, I think, a little bit as far as, thinking that they're just going to remain in that spot.
Yeah, baseball's actually still kind of doing okay. Basketball's the one that's just like crashing. And they're about to lose Steph Curry and LeBron. Like LeBron and Steph Curry are about to retire. Those are your 2 big generational stars. What are you going to do when they're gone? Like that's going to be really hard. I think they're in big trouble. And baseball's not far behind. They're in a little bit better shape, but part of the reason why is because they were struggling so much for a while there that even a little bump up is actually seems like a big step in the right direction, but it may not be.
Yeah, we'll see with it, and then we'll see if it can sustain. I'm very reticent to believe it will because for the reasons Jeffrey put, Brendan, one of the reasons that football is the draw that it is everyone feels like they've got a chance every year. The parity of the sport allows everyone, even the Cleveland teams, to feel like we've got a shot. And in baseball, when you got half the teams feeling like they don't have a shot, and they're right to feel that way, they're not just being emotional fans. They have a right to feel that way. Well, that's not how, there's no way you can explain to me how that's good for the sport. Like you say, you might still find success. You might still be able to live high in the hog off the fat boys like your Dodgers or your Yankee teams, but it doesn't mean your sport's in a healthy state. And it doesn't mean long-term you can know you're going to survive and roll well as a sport if that's going to be the case.
Right.
Thank you though, Jeffrey. Appreciate you for that. Dogzilla Monster with a $2 donation says, do you worry about Brian Inn's mental health?
This is Nemhauser, I guess.
Oh, Nemhauser's? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that his YouTube shows are a little bit, less enthused when the team isn't winning. But at the same time, like, I'm you look at the content creators for football teams or sports teams in general on YouTube. We have Giants fans that have been making videos after every game for 15 years. And they're, if they can make it, I'm pretty sure we can make it.
Yeah. Was Brian been having a hard time lately or something?
I haven't been watching, so I'm not sure. I barely have time to make my stuff. I don't have time to watch other people's stuff.
I wish I had more time to watch. It's like, you're just always grinding on the next thing a little bit. So it gets tough, especially in season. But Dogzilla, and me and Brendan doing this for years now on it. It's been good that we've had at least a decent team, but both me and him would love to, and I'm sure Brian's the same way, would love to see a team that was a winner and a true contender even for 1 year, because it is a lot more fun to cover than it is having to turn over disappointment all the time. And that does get tough. But like Brendan says, there's been a lot of franchises that have way worse than us trying to find their way, and they still are able to do it. They're still able to keep their brains about them and keep their positive attitude about it. So, but it can dog you down a little bit. You can. That's for sure. Thank you, Dogzilla. Thomas Cox, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, I also had whose realistic options. I also had whose realistic options is OC.
I think the names that we talked about are realistic, with the exception of Stefanski. Like, Stefanski's probably going to get another head coaching job, so maybe he's not realistic. But why isn't Mike McDaniel realistic? If he gets fired, do you think there's going to be some long line to hire him as a head coach? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think when it comes to a Dable or a Mike McDaniel, Thomas, I think that those guys are going to have to go back to being OCs. I don't think, like Brendan said, I don't think there's a chance that they get a head coaching job. And then when you have Seattle where they're at, and think about it, if Lucas has come back and he's okay, you got Lucas, you got Cross, you got your pillar tackles, you've got DK Metcalf probably re-signed to extension, you got JSN to work off of. There's some stuff here on this team that, as an OC, that could prove to be attractive, along with the fact you got an organization that spends and is committed to winning. And that's an attractive destination location potentially for a really good OC. Part of what I think limited us in our OC scope before with like Carroll, Thomas, is that OCs were very well aware of the fact that Carroll was going to have his share of say over what was going to happen on that offensive side of the ball. I don't think that McDonald plays it that same way, as evidenced by some of the frustration he's had with McDonald on him going kind of wild and free and crazy like he has on that offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And I remember that there were also some conversations that a lot of offensive coordinators didn't want to work with Wilson because they felt his game was incompatible with the way they wanted to coach offense, which some people think that's why we ended up with Waldron when we did. Some people think that's why we had Schottenheimer, and Schottenheimer was good. Schottenheimer did great here, I think, but he wasn't a big name. He wasn't someone with a lot of gravitas. He wasn't someone that everyone wanted. Now, that doesn't mean anything, as we've seen with like Eric Bieniemy. There was a time when everybody wanted him, and now he may never work in football again because he's really bad, but I'm just saying.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. So, and I don't think, again, for the record on this, Thomas, I don't think either me or Brennan are necessarily pushing 100% to say move Grubb, just that we would understand it if McDonald went down that road, and it wouldn't be a complete, surprise as to him making that choice if he did. Mm-hmm. And also, it looks like it's maybe heading down there as a trend too.
Yeah, I feel like it's happening. I do.
Yeah. So it's kind of just reading it more than anything else on the person, then rather than being a personal opinion on it, let's say. But Thomas, thank you for all your donations to the channel, man. Appreciate all that support. Feed Me More Seahawks, thank you for the $2 donation. Says, remember when golf was really popular and tennis? Yeah, tennis is another sport. When I was coming up through the 80s, is dying off. That was right where you had Phil McEnroe and had all of those guys that, it was big. Younger people, tennis, it was big. It was big. Golf, really big. But these things, they will go through and dip. You can have it where your sport becomes kind of a shell of what it once formerly was.
Golf's fun to play. I don't think it's fun to watch. I play golf a lot. I'm a fan of playing it, but watching it, that's a bridge too far for me.
I have a hard time with that one too. Myself, my grandpa, boy, his retirement was on goes the golf all day and just watching it all day. You go, my God. You sit there and watch them like, how can you do this? You just sit there all day just staring. Like, holy moly. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it, man. I couldn't do it.
The question is, what sports are replacing these sports that are dropping out? It doesn't feel like new sports are coming up. It's like,
well, that's where I say it's more, this is the video game. There's more stuff to do than ever before. Like you're in the mid 70s and you want to watch TV, you got a couple channels to watch, right? Like there's only so much to see. But you have in this day and age, you have endless possibilities. You can watch every movie that's ever been made anytime you want, anywhere. These are things that were not always readily at the fingertips that sports didn't have to compete with as far as for eyeballs go. Now you got to compete with that stuff. So I think it's a little bit of a different game, and they don't have as much of the advantages that they once did.
So what you're saying is that in the next couple of years, Seattle should get like a professional Fortnite team.
Probably, yeah.
And we should all just start watching people play Fortnite, like the Seattle Skibiddies or something.
Hey, I'll be trying out. I'm a hell of a Fortnite player, so let me roll. I'll get on there and kick ass. So
yeah, what are you, a revolver god? What do you use?
I like the shotgun sub combo. So you give them one hit with the shotty, then you flip to that sub, and then you put them down with the sub. You know. Plus, then if they start trying to wall up on you, you can get right through their walls with the sub. Just you run right into their head.
You play build, and you don't do the no build. Everyone I know moved to no build.
No builds for pussies. You know what I mean? Real men build. We don't worry about guys that can build a castle in 2 seconds. These kids are ridiculous, by the way. They're just you're fighting them, and all of a sudden there's like, what the hell?
It's not even a joke though. Like we do have esports teams that make millions of dollars. We might actually start having professional video game playing teams that are in. I remember in the 90s, I used to watch this stuff, StarCraft in South Korea, because obviously StarCraft is huge in Korea. I would watch it with my mom because my mom's Korean, and she would be like, "They're talking about these StarCraft players like they're athletes, literally. Like they're literally acting like they're talking about Tom Brady and Peyton Manning dueling each other in a playoff game." And like, that was the 90s. It's probably more so now.
I think it would have already over the last about 8 years, Brendan, to your point on this, as it has climbed up, and we've seen some of esports dip down a little bit at the same time because of some other issues. I think the video game industry has really slowed down in the last few years as far as pushing the ball forward. And that's really what's held this back from this coming more forward as far as esports go. But I think you're bringing up the right thing here, which is that when there's a hole that will exist as people start to check away from this, they'll probably slide to something more like that into the future. And that'll be more of what, I know it's not taken hold quite yet, but keep in mind as well, it's a young sport. It's a young new thing. And just like with baseball and football and basketball, all these things, it takes time for that stuff to take root and become popular and part of the true zeitgeist, so to speak, and what people pay attention to. But I could see those things filling in the hole here on this, Brendan. I could. It gets back to purity too, right? Because with esports and you play a video game, it's like, hey, I'm against you. There's no, hey, I bought my setup that makes I bought this great setup and my system's more powerful than your system. No, it's 1-to-1. Whereas like what we see with sports right now with baseball being able to outspend, having preferential treatment maybe from some of those more major markets. There's always the worries about officiating and that type of stuff influencing to what maybe the sport wants versus what it's fair and it's an even ground kind of thing going on. Those things are removed with some of that esports stuff. So that's where I think that these sports have to be very careful, Brendan, and sometimes how they operate and get too high on the hog.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely worth noting. And, there are some games that even with the fact that video game developing isn't going so well right now, it feels like you've got the games that don't die, like Rocket League. Like Rocket League's never going to go away. And that game never needs to like really change or do anything different. It's just always there.
Yeah. Call of Duty, same way. I mean, I'm not, it's not the great, but it's going to be there. It ain't going anywhere. It's always going to be a part of the thing. So yeah, I agree.
I will say I'm a huge fan of professional poker. And I watch that, and some people don't get that, but I get it. So,
those can be fun. Yeah, those are fun. It's especially get some personalities going back and forth because they'll talk some trash at each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
They'll get after it with that. Brendan, give me just one quick second if you could, man.
Okay, no problem here. All right. So yeah, that was a long tangent we went on about stuff that really doesn't have anything to do with the Seahawks, but it does highlight something that I think is pretty interesting about where the future of competitive sports could be. Hot dog eating contest, yeah, that's a thing. People like that. The thing is, they only really like it once a year. Poker gives you some character people to root for. Not really anymore, Brian. Not as much as they used to, and that's one reason why I don't watch it as much as I used to. There aren't really personalities anymore. Everybody's just kind of like this kid in a hoodie wearing headphones. And it's considered like a negative thing in poker to have personality now, because the idea is that you're giving information away when you act like that. So there's this belief now that you as a poker player need to just have no personality and give away nothing. And I think it
Bear with me, man.
I think it actually has hurt the viewership that everyone acts like that now.
With
Sorry,
what?
I was just answering a question, comment in the chat about poker. How there used to be big poker personalities, but
Mhm.
now everyone feels like if you act like that, you're going to give away information. So you watch poker now, almost everybody's just this kid in a hoodie and glasses with headphones on, and it's not as fun. It used to be more fun,
Yeah.
and the personalities are starting to really die off, and it's too bad. It's not as much of a viewer sport as it used to be.
Yeah, they should make him take off the sunglasses, headphones, all that stuff. You should have to
Mhm.
operate
Yeah,
like they did back in the old West times, man. You know,
exactly.
there were no hoodies in back in the
Mhm.
old West days. So
Yeah.
come on,
Yeah, do you know why they call it the nuts in poker?
why?
Because in the old days of poker, you would put your wagon nuts on the table and like you're betting your wagon because
Mm.
it's like representing the fact that you're betting your wagon that you're using to get home, and you would only do it if you had the best possible hand. So they called
Okay.
it the nuts because you're putting your wagon nuts on the table to say, I bet my wagon I must have the best hand. Mhm.
Oh my gosh! Even back then, they were putting the car deed or whatever on the thing.
Yeah,
You know, like that's a whole thing
right.
that's not stopped being as much a thing. Remember that was the whole thing. We were growing up in kid in all the movies. They put the keys on top of the.
Yeah.
That was always the move. Is you
It
put the
was
keys
wild
on.
that we didn't have table stakes back then.
Yeah,
And you could just be like, I bet $3 billion. Good luck calling me.
I think they should let the players in-game bet. Like you ain't get another catch. I'm gonna put my Rolex on it, or
Hmm.
I'll put my whatever my car on it or whatever. Throw the keys down on the field in front of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Nolan, thanks for the $5 donation. He says, just wanted to say thank you to both of you for all of your hard work, and I wish you both a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Go Hawks.
Thank you, Nolan.
Thank you for that, Nolan. Merry Christmas to you as well. Happy New Year as well to you guys. Really appreciate all of your guys' support here on both of our channels here throughout this year. For many of you, it's been many years, and members only over as well on the channels as well. So we really do appreciate all that support, as you guys have been great with us, as you guys always are on that side. So thank you for that, Nolan.
Thank you, Nolan. I appreciate that.
Merry Christmas. Long live the king. Thank you for the $5 donation. Had water cooler debate. Should all kickoffs in the fourth quarter be old school ones? Why have to declare a trick play? You wouldn't declare a fake punt.
I don't mind the new kickoff. I think the new kickoff's fine. I don't think it's changed the game quite like I was expecting, but that's mostly because teams are not even messing with it. They're kicking it into the end zone. They're like, we don't want to deal with this. So I do like the new kickoff. I think he means having to declare an onside kick, because you don't have to declare a trick play. You have to declare an onside kick.
It becomes hard, doesn't it? Because you can't really onside kick it with the way the structure is set up for the kickoff rules. You have to declare it kind of
Right.
because it changes the whole thing. And that's why you're saying, King, why not maybe move it to the old school ones for fourth quarter as much so you open up the door for onside kicks. I think what I would say with that is just this. Onside have such a low success rate to them. It's so hard to get those back for those teams. It's such a it's really a minutiae. It's a very tiny amount of plays in the NFL season that actually come down on those. And if you've got to come down to doing an onside kick, part of me goes, you should have taken care of business before that point. If you're to that spot of things.
Yeah. It's like the gentleman's agreement that every team in the league has, that when a team is kneeing the clock out, the game's over.
Yeah.
Except for Greg Schiano. He didn't participate in that agreement, but everyone else is just like, look, we're not going to try to go force a fumble on a kneel down. The game's over. We're good. Most teams don't even call timeout anymore. They're just like, okay, it's over. Yeah. And I think that you do have some like gentleman's understandings in sports like that. So I'm fine with the current system. I'm fine with it. On a surprise onside kicks were not a big part of the sport anyway. We saw maybe like one a year.
Yeah. If it was more of a part of the game, I think, King, I might be more a little bit torn on this one. Something I'll say too about the kickoff, and then we're starting to see it right now as we move into late November into December, And that is that the conditions start coming into play more. And so whereas you might be in September, October, and those kickers can, because the air is nice and it's not heavy, and they can boot that ball right through the back end zone almost like every single time, like it's no problem. We saw this with Myers in New York a couple weeks ago, where you knew they wanted to kick that through. They had given up a touchdown return. You knew they wanted him to kick it through the back of the end zone, but the winds were swirling and he couldn't do it. And I think that this could really come up around playoff time in some of these open air stadiums out there on some of these kickoffs where you see it really affect games, being able to bring these balls back out and make that more of a factor again. That was the whole point of this, is to make these plays a factor in the sport once again. And I think it will be in at the most important time of the year.
Yeah, and we now have a kick returner that can catch the ball, so maybe we'll be on the happy end of that.
Hopefully
I'm liking Darden, by the way. He looks good back there, man. He catches that ball like it's nothing.
Yeah, he's comfortable doing it. It shows you the difference between him and D. Williams, who you could see was not comfortable doing it. You know, you could see those fumbles and the muffs coming because he just didn't seem like he was really happy. You know, he seemed to fish out of water at times, I guess. That's how it felt with me back in on him.
Which is weird because that's all he did in college.
I know. I didn't get it either, man. But you can sense it with these punt returners when they're not feeling it back there and they're just struggling and their heart's racing and their hands are nervous. You just sense it. You could just sense it. A few more Seahawks. Thank you for the $2 donation. Appreciate you for that. And all the donos today. Feels like it's more about passion than money now with the players.
Money than passion, right?
More money than passion, yeah.
Yeah. Or you're Reek Woolen and it's neither money or passion. It's just OnlyFans models, I guess.
That's right. That's right. I suppose so. Hey, look, we heard this from NBA players talk about this recently, where somebody asked how many of them really love the game, and it's like maybe like 10 or 20%. I think that there's a very real thing that I see from the NFL when I watch tape at times from guys, where I see guys, like I say, do the sort of clocking in, clocking out thing. And it's not just Seahawks team, by the way. This is NFL wide. You see this where it's just, you're not getting the same passion. These guys are at times going through and just doing a job. They're well paid to do it. And so it is a bit of the reality. This is that not everybody just loves the sport purely as you might hope that they would.
Yeah. There are definitely, there have always been players that played the sport because they were good, not because they really loved it. Like famously Pau Gasol, he wanted to be a doctor and then he grew to 7 feet tall and he's like, I guess I'm going to do this now. But he didn't like basketball that much. Greg Oden didn't like basketball. That's part of the reason why he did what he did. Kwame Brown didn't like basketball. So it happens. It definitely happens.
Yep. And same thing with football, where you have to be a special kind of athlete to be able to play it. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have the love of the sport to do it at the same time as that. And so it's a bit of the nature of the beast, but you're right. For me, it's definitely a part of the process now on that. Thomas Cox, thank you for the $2 donation. Says, sorry, that was my previous question.
That was to my previous question. I think what he's saying is when he said realistic OCs, and I was saying that I do think most of the candidates we're talking about are realistic. I will admit, I don't think Stefanski's realistic because I'm sure somebody will hire him as a head coach.
Mm-hmm.
like if you're a team like the Dallas Cowboys, like wouldn't Stefanski be at the top of your list now that Belichick's off the table?
Well, from Stefanski's standpoint on that, though, too, does he want to go and deal with the Joneses have had a hard time attracting good coaches.
Oh, right. I know that.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that they would want him. And then you have teams like,
I think
Miami
teams that want
him.
Yeah. I think he'll get a job somewhere, to your point. I think Stefanski does get a job. And Thomas, on that one, I'd be like, well, that's not definitely. But no one's going to give Dable another head coaching job. No one's going to give Mike McDaniel another head coaching job. And so, these guys, I think, are, feasible targets for you as an OC here to bring in. So I don't have a lot of names at this point. We still got to get to the point where we even know if they want to move on from Grubb, because we're kind of getting a little bit of this down the tracks of this train before anything's even happened at the front side. So like we're getting a little bit maybe ahead of ourselves on this one, Thomas, to where like, let's get to the point where he's just been moved off of first. And then we can go through all of the realistic options and all that stuff. But I think the point of us bringing up those names, Thomas, is to say, okay, it's not just about moving off the guy. It's also about the guy that you're able to bring in here. Who are you bringing in? Are you bringing in another untested guy, or are you bringing in something tried and true? And if it's tried and true, well, maybe there's reason to do it. If it's just to bring in another untested guy, maybe there's less reason to do it at that point.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. And I probably wouldn't be having this conversation if there weren't going to be so many available guys. Like even a Doug Peterson. Like Doug Peterson, he's got some skins on the wall in this league as a head coach. Forget OC. And I understand that maybe the head coaching shines off the apple a little bit because Jacksonville's gone poorly, but as an OC, if he still wants to do that work, I think he would be good.
Potentially so. I'm open to all possibilities, and what we're wanting is, again, somebody that's done it before, Brennan. That's all I'm asking for. Somebody's done it before and had a lot of success in this league in doing it. If we're going to move off a grub, that's the pivot. Yeah.
Right.
Louise, thank you for the $5 donation. Louise says, "Hey, with Steve Belichick leaving likely to North Carolina, how much do you think that will affect UW with its recruits and current roster? Kamori entered the port."
Yeah, it looks like we are going to lose Steve. I can't imagine him not going to UNC. I don't know why you would even consider doing anything else. And I mean, there will be some effect on these recruits, but it's really hard to gauge this stuff. And I got to be honest, when the Huskies are done with their bowl game in a couple of weeks, I'm just going to kind of tune out, and then I'm going to check in August and be like, okay, who stayed, who left, who's here? Because I can't follow this stuff. It's driving me crazy.
Yeah, college football has become pure chaos right now with the transfer portals and the NIL, and it's not for the betterment of the sport. These guys are bouncing all over the place, and I like having freedom for the players, but not ultimately to where it's going to hurt the sport, them having that freedom. And that's where we've reached, because these guys have no sense of loyalty. They're guns for hire. They're essentially going to, go one place to the next. I mean, think of it like this in the situation I've heard it described at times. You have a player you've spent, let's say you give him for $300,000 for that year to play for you. Then he gets out on the practice field and he just want to practice hard. Hey, practice hard. No. Practice hard. No. Practice hard. No. All right. Well, we're not going to do this with you. Okay. Well, I'm transferring. And there seems to be always colleges behind these players to jump right back on them. There's another college there that's going to throw more money to it. And so it's just like, this is going to erode college football even more so than maybe it's been in recent years. And it's not to say that I don't think the players should be paid, but this whole no rules thing, let them just do whatever they want wildly. These kids, I don't think that that's good either.
Yeah. Some people have brought this up. What they used to do was when you transferred, you had to sit out a year. If they brought that back, all these problems would go away, because then you could only transfer if you really, really wanted to.
Yep. I'd be in favor of doing that at this point, because I think that it's you got some of these guys have been there's one guy out there who's been at 5, 6, 7 different programs. He's 27, 28 years old. Give me a break. Give me a break. Phoebe Moore Seahawks, thank you for the $2 donation. It says Rockstar is quality over quantity, which no one does.
I just talking about video game stuff in general, I think, but Rockstar also doesn't make competitive games that can really be featured as like a esport, right? They don't have anything like that. So
no, that's basically single player. I mean, it's very lightly multiplayer game. We'll see what they do with the new GTA, but it's a light smattering of multiplayer over what is really a single player experience. And it's good for what it is, but I mean, even on their take with it, Phoebe, and we talk about pushing the ball forward, every new GTA that comes out ends up taking another 3 or 4 extra years to do. What has it been, almost 10 years since the last GTA at this point? So it's, again, that's that stagnation that's existed in the video game industry right now. No one's really pushing the ball forward. You don't have game after game coming out every 6 months where somebody, wow, look at this game. Oh, wow, look at that game. You're playing a lot of kind of stuff that you've played. If I go over and watch your Twitch channel, Brendan, I bet, you're picking through it right now a little bit, on certain respects. You probably find fun stuff, but it's not Prime City, you know what I mean, on what you're getting to play.
Well, the games I play tend to be very long, so I don't have that problem so much. But if you don't play the kind of games that I play, absolutely, you're going to have that problem. I play Atlas games that are over 100 hours. Yeah. So I get into it. I'm in it for like a month, 3 months almost. But if you're not into that kind of stuff, it's a little bit harder. And I remember when I was much younger, getting hyped for like E3 in 2004, and you get like the first look at Halo 2 and San Andreas that year, and I think that was Half-Life 2, which I still think is probably the greatest video game achievement maybe ever. And you don't have that stuff anymore. It's just like I guess FromSoft is the closest thing you have to that now. And again, those games are not really multiplayer competitive games, so it just depends on what you're into. And it is frustrating. Like, I was looking at the Game Awards this year, and like the nominations are a joke. One of the nominees was a DLC for Elden Ring, That's not a game. That's DLC. Why is it nominated for Game of the Year? It's stupid.
Yeah, because the games suck and you're picking over crap. It's hard to pick something good when it's all got more levels of crap to it than good. And there's a lot of room, luckily, here because it's been so suppressed for so long, the video game industry. Once those floodgates open up, eventually when the next thing pushes forward, this engine, that engine, it'll be awesome of an experience because it'll feel like a true step forward, tandem step forward then at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Dogzilla, thank you for the $2 donation. And he asked, is there a salary cap in the NFL for coaching?
No,
there's not. You can spend whatever you want. And one of the places that we could maybe pull McDaniel or one of these other Dable kind of coaches in here is maybe you're able to say, hey, we'll give you the extra $400,000 or $500,000. We're not restricted by our budget. We don't care. We want the best OC in here. We'll pay the price for it. And I've always said that's what you should do. I know you're the same way on this, Brendan, of this is the place from a market opportunity wise, you should take advantage of that. There's an OC on the market and he's the bright candidate and you can blow him out of the water versus anybody else by really giving him that extra money. Do so because there's no cost for really doing it other than owners got to come a couple $100,000 extra out of their pocket, which when we're talking about the billions of this league, who cares?
Right. And, Jody's one of the wealthiest owners to begin with anyway. So
that's right. That's absolutely right. But thank you, Dogzilla. Appreciate you for the donation. You guys are unbelievable in sport. We haven't gotten to the preview part of the show because we had so many donations here. Woo! All right. Well, let us pivot here to this upcoming matchup here coming up. This very important upcoming matchup this Sunday. Brendan, it is do or die for our Seattle Seahawks in many ways. I think technically you probably could lose this game and mathematically be still in it in some way or another. But let's just call it what it is. You probably got to come out with this win if you really want to feasibly have a chance to get in the playoffs.
Yeah, we would need the Jets to come through for us in the early window, probably, and that'd be real nice. I'll remove I'll remove all the vaccines out of my body if the Jets win that game. But
there we go.
I'm not counting on it.
No, I think Rams, especially the Rams, where they're at right now, and recently I know they haven't the greatest. That was in rain. Those conditions are always going to neutralize and equalize things for both teams. But you've got to win this game, Brendan, and. This Vikings team, it's lucky to hear that we've got, sounds like Geno Smith, no structural damage. He's going to be out there playing for you this Sunday. But at the same point in time, this is not the ideal team to maybe take on when you have a quarterback that's a little bit gimpy, huh?
Yeah. But I'll tell you, there's not enough alcohol in the world to get me to watch Sam Howell against Brian Flores. So at least we got Geno. It's
true. That's true. It would be much better than the alternative where we'd have no chance in this game if it was Howell going up against that Brian Flores defense. And when I come in to look at this game, Brendan, you always start out with where's the place we start out in this game? Where's the spot that you begin from? The place that I kind of do begin from is how are we going to be able to deal with those Flores blitzes? How will the poor pass protection that's been there throughout the year hold up in this? What is Grubb going to do to counter it from a having, those kind of hot route reads that you can go to from Geno's perspective? Do you feel the same way on that?
Feels like the only thing you can do. Like, I will say the Seahawks have had a little bit of success handling teams that are very blitz happy in recent weeks, like the Cardinals 2 weeks ago. But then they've also had moments of great failure like the Cardinals 4 weeks ago. So I can't even feel good about that part of it. I think that, the word that you used with Flores earlier this year was aura. His aura right now is just off the charts with the way he's calling that defense. And I'm intimidated. I'm intimidated by it, and I don't know how we handle it. I don't know how we handle it over the 35 attempts that Geno's likely to have in this game, or dropbacks, or whatever you want to call it. I think that you have to go to that super quick passing attack, a lot of hot routes, a lot of check downs and dump offs. And I can't imagine doing anything else. I don't think you're going to be able to attack them deep. I don't see how that's going to work at all. Maybe you have to do what you did against the Jets and just go to constant max protect. But that opens up other problems, right? Because the thing with the Vikings is that, they'll have the occasional blitz where they send like 6 or 7 guys. But really, it's about them stacking the box and selecting the 4 guys to blitz that you didn't expect. So there's a lot going into this one, and it's really going to be hard to win the chess match. And that's, I think, the number one thing that, as a Seahawks fan, has to alarm you going into this week.
Yeah, it does. And it's unfortunate, Brendan, because, you know, you look at a blitz and you say one of the places you can attack the blitz is with the hot routes and get your security blanket out in a flat or just a quick throw. But then another part that you oftentimes will go to is say, well, we'll go with the running game. And that's the part that I come to here where it's unfortunately this Viking team is that they're so good at rushing the passer, but they've also been so good at stopping the run in addition to that. They don't necessarily have a hole somewhere that you can go after on this defense on the surface of it.
Yeah, I guess their hole is Shaq Griffin starting at corner for them, which good for him. Still getting those checks.
Yeah. Yeah. He's had a long career now. You know, I mean, he's made his money and he's definitely had a long for a third rounder. He's been in the
Yeah.
league for quite a bit of time, you know.
So maybe that's the weakness, but it's hard to get to that weakness, man. I mean, it's an elite defense. We know that, right? They're ranked fourth in points allowed this season. They allow 18 points a game. So they shouldn't necessarily be a defense with a weakness to find, but just thinking about that math equation where you have our offensive line, our pass protection against their defensive front and the way they play defense. And it's like, I don't know how I overcome this to win this game.
Yeah, I don't either. I do come down to the run game and that gap stuff that we run thinking about that, Brendan, where, you know, Cardinals are a team that likes to blitz a lot. A couple weeks ago, we were starting to bring out that gap scheme. The big 50-yarder that you got on Charbonnet's run happened when you had Buda Baker blitzing from the high side of the formation and you were running back to the weak side of the formation. And I wonder with this is if you can catch them with some of those stacked boxes, if there can be some audible adjustments that they can go to on the fly where, okay, we've got, you know, two guys up here on the far side of the line of scrimmage. We'll have Geno audible to a gap going back to the other side, and a little bit like you do with that Charbonnet run. And maybe that's a way that you can counter this, because when you pull those two guys from this side, and if you have the blitzers coming from over here, they're kind of neutralized, right? Because you're going to this side of the field over here. They've got to run all the way over to get to those running backs. And by the time they're there, the back's gone. If he's getting downhill properly, especially if Walker comes back, if he can this week, we'll see where the running back situation is. But that's maybe one of the adjustments I might try to really call upon. And as we saw last week, you know, when you did go to gap, you had some success with it. Just Grubb wasn't committed to staying with it.
Yeah. And maybe part of that was because we were down 14-0 immediately and he panicked. You know, I understand that they probably looked at it and he was like, oh crap, my defense doesn't have it today. I got to go. But I still think that there was some possibility of running the ball more than they did. And, he's got that in his ear all week. So you would think that he would hear that and go like, oh, I better make sure I do it this time.
Yeah, I agree. And if it was a one game situation with Grubb on that, I'd understand. But this has been also something he's leaned towards time and time again. He's always looking for that exit door to start passing and get away from the run game. And I don't think this has got to be one week where he fights that pull as much as ever, because if you lose your balance in this game against this team, it could get ugly and get ugly really quick.
Yeah. The frustrating thing is we were kind of coming off our best game of the year, right? We ran the ball great against Arizona. We ran the ball a lot. It was a very balanced attack. And you score 30 points and you'd think you learned something from that, but not really.
Yeah. No, not really. And maybe the hope here too comes in from my standpoint. The blitzes are tough and they're going to bring some pressure there. Van Ginkel and Greenyard, the guy that they signed in free agency, both guys they signed in free agency the offseason are working really well as two edge guys for them in this defense. But I will say that maybe as much of some of the issue for us offensively in pass protection, Brendan, has come from that interior of the offensive line struggling and the heat coming from there. I look at the Viking team and I don't know if I see a real game changer on the inside of that defensive tackle position in the same way we've had to deal with in recent weeks, like a guy like a Quinnen Williams or Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt last week with the Packers. They don't quite have the same, do they, on this Viking front?
Yeah, they might look like it this week, though.
Well, yeah, we do give career days out to those interior linemen, so yeah, that is true on that. But maybe a little easier at least than where it's been this year at certain matchups where you've had tougher guys up front to block.
Yeah, Jalen Redmond, who doesn't play a ton for them, but he does rotate in and out of that defensive line. He's got a concussion. He may not play. That affects things a little bit because he's actually been very good in a limited role for them this year, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, they've got, and they're solid there. They just don't have that game changer necessarily that's really going to flip the field on you and give you a hard time. Is the other corner they brought in Gilmore? Is he playing?
It looks like it, but we're never sure until game day, right? I could have sworn that Jair Alexander was going to play this last game, and he didn't. So
that's true.
It looks like he will play.
That's true. So yeah, you got so you'll have Gilmore one side, Shaq Griffin, Old Seahawk on the other side. Got to feel like you're going to have some wide receiver mismatches out there one way or another at that point. but got to hold up in pass protection long enough to make it happen, Brendan. Got to find some balance. You say, and let's bring out the trick play this week too. Sound good to you? Let's get the trick play brought back out, maybe.
Pass protection to let the trick play develop, but yeah.
That's true. You can at least try it. At least try it, especially if the offense is struggling to find footing like they were a little bit last week, where there aren't a lot of answers to be had readily made. Locate something on it.
Right.
Is there something else? Is there something else you'd like to see offensively? Fly sweep, more of a hey, let's run the 5 tunnel screens this week.
One thing I did notice when I was looking over the advanced stats from that Packers game is that a lot of our success running the ball was running outside the box, like outside the tight end. And that kind of goes back to what we've wanted this running game to be for a long time. So maybe that's something you can lean into a little bit more.
That's definitely what those gap runs are too. Gap runs are going to take you to the outside of the tackle box on those runs when they're pulling them back across. So one leads into the other on that, Brendan. One creek leads into the river on that one a little bit. They want to go that route.
But other than just, play better, I can't really think of too much else.
Yeah, certainly would love to see a little bit of the pre-snap motions, get maybe a couple fly sweeps in there, work the tunnel screens, Brendan, because that's going to be something that can counter the blitz of the Vikings. They get upfield, they send all those defenders, you hit them on something on the backside and you let it roll. So keep them off balance as much as you can from a Grubbs perspective. You're only gonna be able to do so much. It's a good defense, great defense, but there are some things you can do as an offensive play caller, I think, to help this offense out, especially with Geno not being at 100% from a mobility standpoint coming into this game.
Yeah. And man, that's terrifying to think about, but he's got to be out there, right? We need him.
Got to roll out them. Like you said, Sam Howell out there is not an option. He's not ready to go right now. And you're losing this game guaranteed if he's out there with almost 100% certainty. And so Geno, it's, and you give the Geno a lot of credit going out there and fight. He's in a contract year right now. You go to these risking injury right now, going out there and playing. But season's on the line, man. We need everybody on this one if we got any hope to make this happen. So hopefully Geno can tough it out and carry the day and find answers, and Grubb can call his best game of the year. He's going to need to, I think, to come out the win on this one.
Yeah. Can't disagree with that.
Let's slide it over to the defensive side of the ball. And defense really started out rough last week. I think they had 12 carries, 73 yards for Jacobs, but you found your footing in the second half, 12 carries, 21 yards. So they made some adjustments as the game went along. Viking team runs the ball maybe not as well as the Packers do, but they run it pretty well. And they're very balanced offensively. How do you get after this offense?
I'm looking at the tackle spots. They lost Christian Darrisaw many weeks ago, and their offense was falling off a little bit after that injury. They've kind of righted the ship now. But this last week, O'Neal, their right tackle, got hurt. He went back in. He might play, but he's clearly not 100%. He was listed on the injury report this week. So I'm looking at those tackle spots, and I'm thinking you should be able to do something there, because the downgrade from Darrisaw to Cam Robinson's pretty big. Darrisaw was playing really good. So I'm looking at that primarily, because you got to get to Darnold. You got to hit him. You got to find some way to get him off his spot.
You really do. And something that stands out to me with McDonald's defense right now, Brendan, is that it seems like he wants to stay with the 4 down linemen early downs and kind of then earn the right to be able to do the stack boxes and the simulated pressures. But from my perspective on this, there's a real draw for me with Darnold on this to be getting into those kind of looks much earlier on. And I felt like we tried to hold off of doing that in the Packer game, and then we never really got kind of to it because we never got him into 3rd and longs. It was, I think they averaged like 3.5 yards on 3rd down on the day. Would you be in the same place on that? Like, let's maybe go a little bit earlier with some of these stack fronts and some of the blitz game on that, because that is a place that I feel like Sam Darnold does struggle. It's when you can make him think, make him process. You can start to overwhelm him a little bit of the pass rush. You can kind of get to him on that.
I mean, I like the idea. I wonder if when they see that, they just start running the ball a lot. I wonder if they maybe just try to mitigate that completely if they see it on early downs. Because the idea of doing it on late downs is they have no choice but to throw it anyway, right?
Yeah. No, I think it's ideal to do it in the later downs, but just my issue with it is you're not good enough on that 4-man down front where teams are at times running you on the ball in those looks. You're trying to go with those 6-man boxes because you got the 2 high shell on the backside. And so you just end up getting kind of like you did last week. You can get pummeled a little bit with those fronts and those looks, because it does seem like the team slipped away or has drifted away a bit from the 3-4 looks as the season has gone along, stayed back in those 4-man fronts. And I just think the Vikings can maybe get after you a little bit with that. They can at least make their running game functional enough in the balance to where now you don't ever really get into that place of third and longs by and large. And you're going to allow a lot of sustained drives at that point, in my opinion. But
yeah, it's tough. I think we just don't have enough guys up front. Like they've got their 3-man rotation with Williams, Murphy, and Reed, and then they give Hankins and RRH a little bit.
Slight,
like they don't, and I can tell they don't really like those guys. They don't think very much of them. They're trying to play them as little as possible. I feel like. So I think they have to go to the 2-man fronts, which I hate, but I mean, it speaks to the fact that we need to bring in another quality defensive lineman this offseason, so we actually have enough to really rotate in and out. But I do like the idea. I think it's a good idea, but I do wonder if this Vikings team, with how smart they've proven to be offensively, would just know, okay, if you see the stacked box, just audible to a run play.
It's very possible. It's very possible they go on in on doing that. But like I said, it's just the alternative to me on that is just those 4-man fronts aren't always necessarily working either. And if you're going through the early part of this game and they're doing like the Packers did you last week, they're walking you up the field like that. I think you got to try to find some adjustments defensively rather than just let's hope this thing rounds out by the second half. And we'll keep them to like 30. I think you got to try to be a little more aggressive than that as a defense in this game if you want to take this game against a quality opponent. That would be, to me, a little bit of a playing not to lose is what it feels like to me a little bit. Last week against that Packer offense, it felt like playing not to lose defensively. It didn't feel like you were pedaled down to the metal.
Yeah, the other thing that sticks out to me about that Packers game is how they killed us with screens. Felt like every time we got pressure, they would just have the ability to check it down to a screen, and it worked really well. Like I was going through the coverage numbers yesterday, and very few air yards for that Packers team on most plays. Yeah. Everything behind the line of scrimmage. I wonder if the Vikings might do the same thing if you try to bring something like that.
Well, the thing was last week, though, is you weren't doing that off the blitz, though. So that's the thing with this, again, we come back to is if I hear what you're saying, but the alternative then the alternative thing's got to be working. So last week, Brendan, with them throwing those short passes, in your opinion, were those short passes happening because of stacked boxes?
No. I'm just saying, I wonder if you make it worse, though. I wonder if they just,
it's possible, but that's where, to me, on these, why I get caught up on this, Brendan, is you've had some of these games like this, right? The Detroit Lions game and the Packer game has a lot of similarity in how you called your defensive game plan. 4-man boxes, stay to depth, just try to just make them earn it. And like, you didn't stop them. That's the thing with this. That didn't stop them. So like you gave up 30 points last week. It was worse. Worse is like, okay, you give up 40. I don't care. I'd rather, if it's a matter of that the team's going to slow bleed us through to get us to 30 points or quick 40, I don't really care at that point. Your defense isn't good on either of those two fronts at that point. And so, I'd much rather go down swinging than, and this is the whole point I thought of going to McDonald, quite frankly, as a DC at times, is that we don't do this whole, we're just going to try to make you earn your way up and bend, but don't break. And we'll just get by on that. I thought there's more of a, we're trying to shut you down kind of feel to things. And I think with this defense isn't at its best this year, Brendan, is when they're in more of a, not taking it to them on our heels kind of situation is when they're at their worst, in my opinion. Are you buying that or are you against that?
No, I totally buy it. I'm just trying to think of reasons why McDonald might not buy it. And, we've seen it before. Like I remember before we played the Niners in our first game, we were talking about how we need to do all these things and they didn't do those things. And the reason was probably because of these things that we're talking about.
Yeah. That's why I drive for the adjustment of it. It's just, I think we've seen a couple of these when they've tried to lean in. If it worked going this other way, I'd be in favor of it, but it's not necessarily worked all that well when they've leaned into that, and especially through a whole course of a game like last week and how that was. Feed Me More Seahawks, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, the past 3 games, the run defense has slipped. Indeed. A little bit. Again, they did find some footing into the second half of the game last week. I think some of this is, again, back to that. What I've noticed on tape from this feed me is that there was a little more commitment to going to the 3-4 looks in prior weeks. You're having some success against the run. There's been more of a drive to the 4-man fronts. And it's basically like Brendan just said a second ago in this feed me, it's 2-man fronts. So you have a 6-man box. You're going up against 5, plus you're usually getting a tight end or 2. And if you have 2 tight ends, like the Packers had at times last week, well, now you've got 7 guys on the line of scrimmage for the offense, and you've got 6 on yours. and you're running the too high shell on the backside. So you're light up front at that point. They've got a numbers game on you. And if they want to run a dual block at the point of attack, it's probably going to have some success at that point. So this is where I don't understand why he's leaned into it as much. It was one of my big issues I had with Coach Carroll at the end of his time here, where your fronts are allowing you to become susceptible in the run game. And you can see it prior to the snap coming. And you can see it happening over and over at times. So I don't understand the reason. I'm sure there's a good reason from McDonald's standpoint, but it's not helping the defense, these fronts at times.
Yeah, I feel like it's Hankins being completely washed up and Roy Robertson Harris not really providing much of anything. And he's just like, I don't want to put 3 down linemen on the field because then I'm going to have to play those guys way too much. And I don't like those guys because they're bad at football. I think that's probably what it is. I don't know if I like it. I don't know if that means you should just completely give up on it. Maybe he's trying to like save Leonard Williams and Murphy and Reed a little bit so he can play them a lot more at the end of the year. Maybe we will start seeing that now because it's basically the playoffs now. We have to win this game. I wonder if maybe we just like let it fly with those guys. We're just like, okay, 60 snaps for Leonard Williams. He can take it. We've been pacing him all year so he can do this.
Yeah. No, I maybe it's a good possibility. I mean, certainly I don't think Hankins has played particularly well through the back half of the schedule, and I'm sure they thought they were getting more from Roy Robertson Harris when they made the trade for him too. Didn't expect him to be a game changer, but that you could get some quality play out of him. I think Derek Hall's taken a step back too in run defense off the edge. He's been problematic throughout this year as well. So there's some more on there on top of it as well, as far as guys that aren't necessarily holding up their end.
You said Derek Hall or
Derek Hall?
Okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. I think Maffei's playing the run okay, but Hall.
He's been fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and this would be a great time for Uchenna Nwosu to shake off the rust here. We could really use that.
You went out last week. You put 22 snaps on. What's weird about last week, looking at the snap counts, Brendan, is you took the snap count back on Maffei, but you didn't take the snap count back on Hall for Uchenna Nwosu.
Yeah.
So I don't understand that one myself, how the coaching staff looks at those two players and says, we need to get Maffei out there less and Hall out there more.
I wonder if Maffei's nursing some kind of an injury and they're trying to be careful. I wonder if that's what's going on. That's the only thing that makes sense to me.
Yeah, me too. I think that he had something right around that Patriot game, quite frankly, and that's been why we haven't seen him come on stronger this year, is I think he's been trying to deal with it. I think that's probably right.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas Cox, thank you for the $2 donation. Says, if Mike Macdonald was an offensive head coach, would he win the coach of the year?
No, because Kevin O'Connell has done such an amazing job. I think he's clearly should be the runaway coach of the year. And I don't think anybody else is close.
Yeah, Thomas, I'm in agreement with this one. Where I think he's taken that team with. Think about it. He lost they lost Kirk Cousins this offseason. They had McCarthy then, who's going to be the guy they're going to start. They brought in Darnold. Darnold's never had success anywhere he's been. The hiring of Brian Flores and to get that guy brought in as the right coach. And let's face it, with Brian Flores, his reputation wasn't exactly in the greatest of places. That wasn't a no-brainer kind of hire for O'Connell there with Minnesota. So, I think I'd have to say far and away, you'd have to give it to him. Even Dan Quinn with what he's done in Washington, with what he took over in Washington to get them to tend to the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's another guy that might be a guy that'd be even a little bit ahead on that side of it. Trying to think if there's anybody else who would be maybe a more of a forefront, maybe not beyond that at that point, Thomas.
Dan Campbell, he's done a good job, but that team is really, really good. I don't think he's done anywhere near a good a job as O'Connell.
Yeah. I think O'Connell and maybe Dan, but it'd be third to Mike probably at that point, as far as that goes.
Yeah. Maybe Sirianni, just because they're probably going to have the most wins, but I don't know. He's
tough. He's tough. It just his face says, "Don't give me any credit." Something about the face, Well, thank you again, Thomas. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. I like I like McDonald. He's doing a really good job.
It's just that the impressiveness about O'Connell and what he's done there is that Viking team is, as good as he's got them playing both sides of the ball and getting Darnold into his best state, and not just his best state, but far and away the best version of Darnold we've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, before the season started, I thought the Vikings were going to have a top 3 pick. So
Yeah.
how can I say anything else at this point?
Yeah. Same. Probably about the same place I'm in on that one too. You know, oh, there's going to be a turnover year for them on this side of it. So very impressive job by O'Connell, but very impressive by McDonald too. He's been great coach
Mhm.
for us and what he's brought. What is there anything else as far as this defensive or our defensive matchup? I mean, we got to tackle Jones. We got to stop the run. We got to give him the third and longs. Or certain things that are just part of how we operate as a team to do what we want
Mhm.
to do. But is there anything that you look at with this? I mean, do you want to double team Justin Jefferson? Do you want to just try to, hey, if he's Witherspoon's in the slot on him, single him up with Witherspoon, roll with that, and run your defense normally? How do you play that? The dealing with maybe one of the more dangerous wide receivers, if not the most dangerous wide receiver in the NFL.
I don't know how you could ever get away with single covering Justin Jefferson. I think you kind of got to go with it with the double teams as much as you can. It's tough though because Addison's been good too, and I wasn't a big
Yeah.
Addison fan coming out of the draft, but he's been good. And
Yeah.
they got Hawkinson back now, right? Like he's
Yeah.
been out most of the year. He's back now, so if anything, they're probably in a better state than they've been for most of the year in that regard. So it's tough, but I do think that you have to double him and live with the results otherwise, and that makes this a very important week for Reek Woolen to show that he's not what he was on Sunday night.
It's on him right now. He's got to step up in a big time way, man. And I watched the Rams game earlier in the year with Vikings, and they kind of let Jared. They try to do sort of singling up on to your point on Justin Jefferson, singling him up through the first couple of quarters, and he was really going off. They doubled him, and they were able to kind of shut down that Viking offense a little bit more at that point when they were able to do it. As Donald really will try to feature him, but like I say, Addison's at least a good enough counterpuncher. Hawkinson, we've been harmed by tight ends this year. I'm sure O'Connell's looking at the tape going, we gotta work TJ this week big time, because that's the Hawks defense has got some susceptibility there to the tight end position as well. So it's a tall order for this Hawks defense at home, because there's nowhere you can just really take away. And this Viking offense is balanced. Quarterback is functional enough. He's got some mobility too, so he's not just a statue back there. They're going to have to play their best ball to come away with this win.
Yeah, it's you're going to need something special, and I got to be honest, I'm a little bit pessimistic at this moment. I'm a little bit, not to give away what we're going to end up picking at the end of the show, but it's a lot that needs to go right. I will say I think there's something to be said for the fact that the Vikings are due to lose a game. They've won 7 games in a row. They've escaped some really, really ugly games as well in that process. They barely beat Jacksonville. Like they are kind of due to lose a game, and Seattle needs it much more than Minnesota. There is something to be said there, but once I get beyond that and I start actually looking at the matchup, it's like, man, I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't look good as on paper, especially with Geno not being at 100% coming into this game. I mean, there's no two ways about it. But like you say, you need it more. And the thing I keep coming to in my mind with this team, Brendan, and when I think about this game and these last 3 games, and maybe I'm wrong to do it, and it's just an optimism with me. But the one thing this team has shown, and it hasn't shown a lot as far as certainty on either side of the ball week in and week out. You sometimes don't know exactly what you're going to get. But the thing the team has shown pretty consistently a few times over this year is that sense of resiliency. Resiliency in a game to bounce back, even if it's a bad game like the Jets game, to go and get that win. Resiliency is a team that can lose 5 or 6 games, but still find themselves up at the top of the division at the end of the year, because they're able to find that bounce back. And I keep coming back to that's at least something that's inherently a part of the identity of this team, and that maybe they can tap back into that this upcoming week.
You're right. You're right. And, that's the nature of the NFL. These teams are not that far apart from each other. It's not college. You don't have these games where you have a bunch of 5-star recruits against 0-star recruits, and stuff does happen, but it's not the game that I want to be dealing with right now when my quarterback isn't 100% and my offensive line just played, I would say, probably their worst game of the season, because that Packers front is not very good.
No, they're not. They shouldn't have drawn out the worst game in pass protection for you this year on a year that's been awful for you in pass protection. It's pretty wild that we put the worst performance up at this point, especially with Lucas back in and Lucas playing well and Cross playing well. It's like, wow, make it make sense. Jeff Johnson, thank you for the $20 donation. You guys have been unbelievable with the support today, as you guys always are on this channel. I really thank all of you for that. Jeff, I thank you for the big time $20 donation. He says, I flew out there to Washington from Florida to take my oldest son to his first game. Blew out my voice and couldn't speak until yesterday. That way, Jeff. A lot of fans around us sat there and bashed our own team. Not good. Love what you guys do. Thanks. Well, thank you, Jeff. You are awesome for that support and donation. I'm glad you were able to come forward. I'm sorry your son didn't get to see a much better game in there. And the experiences that I hear from people, and I'm sure you hear the same, Brendan, in your chat, from people in the stadium that are the people like Jeff who are screaming and being as loud as they possibly can to try to help this team out. And then they look around them and they see the people in the stadium not acting by the same manner and having a negative attitude or being silent or not understanding what they're there to do as a fan. And it hurts the heart to hear, but you hear this story over and over and over again throughout the last few years.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to deny anymore, right? Like, you can't really get away from denying that anymore. And I see this too. I mean, when you're at the game, just be a fan. You can complain about the team when you get home. Complain about the team at work the next day. You don't have to complain about when you're in the stadium. Yeah,
you're in there to try to help them out every way you can, and then get out of the end of it and make your analyzation after that point. I agree with you there. I think too, it's just the weird thing to me. I'm sure Jeff saw this too, of just, you got people around you and you can say to somebody, hey, you're being quiet, get up, let's be loud, let's get out. And they will never, every person that's ever asked anybody in that stadium to be loud, that person, in every story I've ever heard, won't do it. They will just sit there and it's almost like they dig their heels in, and they almost want to grow more silent if they can. It's a weird new feature going into that stadium with the fan base now. It's something that you never used to encounter, but I've seen it every time that I've gone to the stadium over the last 10 years. I've seen it every single time, and it's gotten worse every single time I've gotten in the stadium. There's more people growing silent. There's more people that are less engaged in the game itself. They're just sort of casually sort of watching.
Yeah, maybe they do the wave. That's about as far as they go.
Yeah, well, even the wave isn't as strong as it once used to. Run the wave 15 times a game. You might get one good roll through the stadium during the game now at that point. And even then, because people are just not engaged, it dies out halfway through.
Yeah. I hate the wave, though. I think the wave could go. I would trade the wave for...
Yeah, I could take or leave the wave, but people being loud, people being on their horse when they get in that stadium and understand what time it is, to me, that needs to be a necessity when you walk in there. Or don't buy the ticket. See, no, just sit at your home and watch TV, and you're going to get the same experience almost of what you got walking. You're staring. Just do that. Leave the seat open for somebody who is going to do what you are unwilling to do. It's perfectly fine if you don't want to be a screamer. Then don't show up. That's the way that works.
Right.
You know? But Jeff, you did your part, man. And thank you for you and your son trying to make it happen in that stadium, even if the rest weren't on point with that one. And hopefully he'll get to see a game at some point in the future. It'll be a lot better as a game in that stadium than that one. That would have been brutal, man.
Absolutely.
But thank you, Jeff. Very kind of you, man. Very kind of you. Well, let's move to the prediction side of this schedule, as you teased a second ago there, Brendan. Not a matchup we like. Tough Viking team. Home stadium, struggling to provide the full benefit that always can provide. There's some darkness on the surface of this thing, but where do you land when it's all said and done as far as what you think is going to happen?
I'll go 20-13 Vikings. I think the defense is going to play pretty decently. I think the defense is going to have something here. I could see McDonald putting Sam Darnold in some really uncomfortable spots. I could see that, but I just can't get past the Brian Flores part of this. I cannot. Well, I don't want to say I can't see it, because I can see it. It just feels like a lot of things have to go right for us to get to that point, and I'm not there yet.
I feel you, man. I feel you in that. I think it's a very fair outlook on this game to feel that way about it coming into this, because there's just so much that you've got to kind of get. And it's both sides of the ball. You have neither that are really humming at this point. You're kind of trying to find it on either side. With that said, I'm going to lean on that resiliency that I think has been the trademark of this team, and I think that there's the desperation angle of this, and I think that you're just going to you're going to sort of throw. You're going to throw everything you got at the Vikings, I would think, in this game, and have not a lot to lose by doing so. So I'll give us a win with the last drive by Geno and company, 24-21, last minute drive for a field goal to go get you the dub, and your playoff hopes remain alive one more week going forward.
I'm open to it, man. I am open to it. Again, this Vikings team is due to lose. They're due to have some of these injuries they've had and some of their mediocre play catch up to them. Maybe it happens this week. And I think they still have a game against Detroit, and Detroit now has like 8 million injuries on defense. So they can lose this game and still get the division. They can still get the 2 seed, maybe even the 1 seed. So it's not necessarily a game they're in desperate need of. So I'm open to it, but mostly because of that, not because of anything X's and O's that I can put together in this game.
I think that's fair. And like you say, to your point on that, then maybe that informs them a little bit on certain injury situations where they more start to pivot with a guy like a Gilmore or a Redmond to looking towards that week afterwards with Detroit. Let's get them healthy for that game rather than trying to force them out at half speed in this game. Let's get them really right for that final game and that stretch run into the playoffs. Could be also something that informs them coming to this game. So
to me, O'Neill's the big one, the right tackle.
That is big. And they're missing Darisaw. There's no underselling. The second Darisaw went out the game in the Rams game, that offense took a major, major hit. They've been able to find some footing still. They've even had the Atlanta Falcon game where they were awesome offensively. But they're still, he's a really fine left tackle in this sport, and that's a major loss for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do feel like the game will be close. I don't think we're going to get blown out. I'll say that much. The Vikings, not really a blow you out team anyway. So
nope.
I feel good about that.
They're balanced. They'll take it to you defensively, and they'll come out and squeeze the win out at the end of the day. That's kind of their style and their mantra. So, you got to take it that way. So I agree. I think it will be a close game. Hopefully get this W, Brendan, and keep this season's hope still alive, man. Set up that matchup for that final game of the year with the Rams, to where it all comes down to that, and you put yourself in that position at the end of the year. And I think we've looked this as a successful year, but that even make it even more of a successful year if you can get it to that point.
Right.
Well, folks, do me this favor. Hit that like button, whether you're on Seahawks Brendan Nelson's side or you're on the Hawks Nest side. Hit the like button on both. Sub up either channel and both channels if you get the opportunity, as we both would really, really appreciate it with the season winding on down. We will be back here this next week with another BNB show very soon here on next Thursday, as hopefully we're talking about a Seahawks win over this Viking team. But I want to thank you as well, all of the people in the chat. We have 28 donations today in the chat, so a lot of love and support from you guys as always on that. You are amazing in your ways that you support both our channels, and both me and Brendan really, really appreciate it, because you allow us to do what we get to do here. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, thank you.
Brendan, I appreciate you doing this as always, man. And let's go get this dub this week. Let's get back to the good times rolling, and let's keep this season alive. Okay, we're not ready to go into that good night yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I want these games to matter. I need these games to matter, man.
Yeah, I do too. We don't need a long postseason run. I'd love to have it, but I'm not. But let's at least keep this thing interesting. Let's stay in this thing. Let's keep fighting on this. Show me some of that resiliency, and let's go get this dub.
Mm-hmm.
We'll back soon, folks. Back in just a merely here. I'll be back in about 45 minutes with the Behind Enemy Lines show here on this channel. But until then, hope I have to remind you. Hope Brendan doesn't have to remind you, but we're going to do so anyway. Don't you ever forget.
Seems like some people need to be reminded.
Some people need reminded, it sounds like. According to Jeff, with what he was hearing in that stadium, I think we got to remind a few people here. All right. Yeah. So don't you ever forget. Don't do it. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.